August 9th. Welcome back after the summer. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, City Hall is not open except for very limited services by appointment only. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watch now. While in-person delegations are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to participate electronically in future meetings by contacting delegation@kitchener.ca to register as a delegation or submit written comments. So we have first a consent item. It's a demolition control for 138 EBDL Drive. I'll take a mover. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. I see no questions. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries. I think Councillor Galway-Luck, her video got frozen. I think she voted in favor.
Sir, my apologies. Through the chair, we do have a late delegation request for item 1 on the consent.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I didn't see that. So let's take that delegation. So let's negate that vote and we'll just vote again. Just so we're taking in consideration the delegation's comments and then we'll take a vote again. So if that's okay with the committee. Colin, welcome. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Great, thanks very much. I presume people can hear me okay?
We can.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I am not terrifically prepared as I just became aware of this matter last night. And I wanted to just state, first of all, that I live across the street from the property on the agenda, 175 Wellington Street North. I live at 178 Wellington Street North. I've been there. I've owned that property for 10 years now.
Yes. Colin, I'm sorry. We were voting on the consent item, so you didn't have any issue with the EBDL Drive, right?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, Sarah. So this delegation is for the second item, not for the consent. So which is fine. Was there another late delegation registered that wanted to speak about the consent item?
Through the chair, no, my apologies.
Okay, that's okay. It happens. So in that case, the item number 1 has been approved by the committee as already noted. So thank you for that. So we'll go on to discussion item number 2, which is the demolition control 175 Wellington Street North. And before we begin, I would note that a written submission on this matter has been received by Scott Patterson, Patterson Planning Consulting, Inc. But we do have a presentation quickly. So Tim Seiler, planner, is present. Mr. Tim Seiler is available for questions from the committee if they have any. But we have a delegation first noted, which is Bernie Neimer, and then we'll go to the late starter as well. Mr. Neimer, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. And Colin, in the meantime, if you can turn your mic off, and then I'll come to you after Mr. Neimer. Bernie, welcome. Again, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the members of council and committee. I trust you've all been keeping well and excited to get back to work at the City Hall again. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make this presentation in support of the demolition application. This would be typically managed by Scott Patterson, my planning consultant, but he informed me that he was double booked this evening, so he's put it on to me to speak to you directly. I believe that the members of the committee did receive the summary report that was prepared by Mr. Patterson last Friday, and hope that you've had the opportunity to review it in conjunction with the staff report. At the risk of being repetitive, I'd like to start by addressing some of the statements outlined in the staff report, specifically the noted intentions of the demolition. There are 2 that are been repeated and warrant clarification. First, specifically to the use of the property for parking. That is not the intention of this demolition. 130 Weaver Street has adequate parking on-site, and in addition has off-site parking over at 210 Bright Up Street, which is a site plan approved parking lot for 76 parking spaces. So the intention, just so that we're clear, is not to demolish it to create parking. With respect to access, yes, that is true. The statement is true that it is requested that you allow me to demolish it and provide access to the parking lot at 130 Weber. Sorry. So the other issue that was outlined in the staff report was the loss of the residential unit. This will be covered in more detail as we go through the presentation, but the house is vacant. The house has been vacant for a number of years now. It was vacant when I purchased it for a number of years. I did try to tenant it once, and that was a disaster, and certainly not my wheelhouse to operate a single family home. As you all know, I'm a commercial and office developer, not a single family home manager. So with respect to the loss of the rental unit, I would argue that there is no loss. The report goes on to state the intention of the property owner is not to redevelop the lot for residential uses. I think that if you review Mr. Patterson's report, the Patterson Consulting report, it goes into greater detail as to what the intentions are for the lands in question, including 175 Wellington Street. I'd like to speak to page 3 of the staff planning report, where it speaks to the demolition control provisions in the Planning Act under section 33, item A to E. I would argue that every single one of those points is a non-issue. A being to prevent the premature loss of viable housing stock. There is no loss if the house is never rented and never going to be rented, and certainly hasn't been for a number of years. To protect the appearance, character, and integrity of the residential neighborhood. In this particular location, certainly to the north, I have an auto dealer and mechanic. To the south, I have an illegal, I'm sorry, it's a triplex, but I think it's operated as a sixplex, multi-residential house. So as to the loss of character, I believe there's enough separation between those two properties that it wouldn't have an impact on, say, example, in a row of single-family houses, like on the opposite side of the street. This side of the street has got a little more mixture to it. So prevent the premature loss of municipal assessment, I would suggest that that is just a short-term and temporary loss, being that the bigger picture is outlined in the report and the plans for redevelopment of that area. Retain the existing dwelling until redevelopment plans have been considered and approved. This is, I mean, could be argued from your perspective, just leave the house up until you're ready to submit an application for a site plan, et cetera, and go through all of those motions of site plan approval. But the house really is, and I've made an effort to keep it clean, to keep the property clean, to keep it from being boarded and look like it's vacant. I believe I maintain it well and haven't put plywood up on it. And although it has been entered a number of times and the interior of the house has been severely compromised. So it's more of a safety and maintenance issue in terms of when do we allow this house to disappear. Ensure that the redevelopment occurs in a timely manner. Again, if you look to the planning consultant report, it is imminent. Plans are certainly not the long term, but the shorter term future on that block, which I've been working on since 2003 when I acquired 130 Weber Street. I'd like to give those who don't know me or know the property very well, just a quick history around the property and this application. As most of you know me and are aware that I've been developing here since 1986, and I take great care in what I do, and I do so methodically. I don't just go around smashing things and leaving a mess behind. I'm happy to provide a list of properties for anyone who's would like to list of properties that I have developed for them to go and review and take a look at.
Bernie, if you can start wrapping up.
2003, I acquired 130 Weber and completed one of the earlier industrial to office conversions in the city. It followed the demolition of the old Berlin button factory that was on the corner of Duke and Victoria Street, which is now the Pinot Salon and Spa Plaza there at 70 Victoria Street. 130 Weber was very stable, full of established tenants, good tenants, quality tenants, the Community Mental Health Association, ComCare Health Services, Robertson Heeman, Ryder Heeman and Laubin Architects, which became Robertson Simmons or Martin Simmons now. They were there for a good 10 years. So the building was very stable, had quality tenants, but since the road widening and basically road separation where they cut off right up street to Weber, I've lost a tremendous amount of certain prominence to the building, accessibility to the building. And what I was hoping to do was make safe what already is happening on the property. Certainly from the slide that you can see that's up on the screen now, people do enter there to go to the Krug Furniture and to my building, my office building at the back. Removal of that house would make it much safer and visible for people, both from 130 Weber and the people who work at Krug Furniture. Slide, please. This is now the visibility of my building.
Bernie, you're past your 5 minutes, so I'd like you to wrap up if you can. So very quickly, though.
Well, I just, in a nutshell, I need this house down to provide access to the building, try to refill the building, which was once a healthy office and is now suffering with only 2 tenants, one which just came in, so they had 1 tenant for a long time. Provide safety, and you can see the roundabout route on the slide now that you have to take to get to our office building. Slide. This is some of the obstacles that are daily for Krug deliveries along Bright Up Street to that dead end street, the wall behind 130 Weber. Slide. Same visibility heading to the east, facing the building now. We've lost all access, all visibility. This is just showing some of the neighboring.
Bernie, we can't hear you. Your mic has, your sound's gone out.
This is showing the property at the corner of Weber and Wellington, the triplex, 6plex. Slide. Across the street from the corner of Wellington and Weber, that would be west, northwest corner. This is behind the parking lot, where the 130 Weber Street parking lot backs onto the Krug, half of the Krug manufacturing facility. Slide. This is the current entrance to the parking lot from Bright Up Street for 130 Weber Street. And you can see it's a straight line to Wellington Street, which made very common sense to knock down that house. Slide. And that's behind, again, my parking lot at 130 Weber and also abutting the 175 Wellington Street. So in terms of loss of visibility and presence, this is what I have here. Same slide. That's the not sure road, what that is, whether it's Bright Up, an extension of Bright Up or Weber. It's never been identified as to what that section of road is. So if you do Google 130 Weber Street West, it takes you into that retaining wall.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. There are questions, so you'll have opportunity to say more. I did give you extra time past your 5 minutes. Again, if your consultant had been available to speak, they would have spoken, and then obviously you could have gotten additional 5 minutes. So I gave you some extra latitude, so to be able to finish your presentation in completion. There's a question by Councillor Johnston. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Singh, and thank you, Mr. Niemer, for coming in tonight. I'm glad actually that you had an opportunity to make a presentation as well. It's always good to hear both sides of the equation. So thank you very much for coming in. So I'm not exactly sure what you are planning on using the property for. Then it does sound like it will be a thoroughfare or more of a road. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. It's
Okay.
primarily to provide visibility and access to come directly off of Wellington Street into the 130 Weber Street parking lot versus traversing Weber across Aaron's and back down right up street. And as I've shown you, that at times there are trucks and certainly tow motors and operations from Krug Manufacturing which impede people's access. And it is quite dangerous if you're driving down that road and a tow motor crosses back and forth in front of you.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that I had is, as staff had pointed out in the staff report, that this is taking away housing stock. Now, I know you said that that you are not renting that, but that you have kept up the building. It looks very well kept from the outside. It looks to be. So it might not be on the Heritage Registry, but it's certainly kind of a classic Kitchener, older Kitchener Victorian style home. Would you be willing, instead of looking at demolishing it? I'm just throwing this out there because I might as well ask the question, but instead of demolishing it, would you be willing to have someone take that away so that we're not losing that housing stock? Is that something that you've considered?
Take it away in what sense?
So they could put it somewhere else on
Sure. Yeah, I'd be fine with that if they want to take the house. They're welcome to it for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Marsh.
Well, that's an interesting idea that I hadn't thought of, to just take the house. What kind of foundation is it on? I'm guessing a rubble.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds like a challenge and a half, but not unsurmountable, I'm sure, for those who know what they're doing. So do you want to add access to 130 Weber in part to look for additional uses of that property beyond just what you're currently using it for?
Or 130 Weber, you mean? Well, right now it's an office building, which, as I said, was fully occupied and just destabilized as a result of the loss of access, the loss of visibility. And I've had everybody vacated after 10, 15, over 10 years. It had been very stable. Nobody moved, but the construction was very devastating. For 2 years, they were pile driving along Weber Street. There was service interruptions. There was no land taking, so there was no argument, certainly from a legal perspective. I do have a parking lot on Duke Street, as you're aware, across from the Beamer Box factory. That parking lot was designated as off-site parking for 130 Weber Street when I converted it from Kaya Fabrics to an office building in 03. So there is a reciprocal agreement on the Duke Street lot. But what happened when the road separation was created, that 400-meter distance, which allowed it to be a off-site parking spot, physically became 1,100 meters. So over a kilometer to walk up Duke Street to Wellington and back down to the office. So I immediately bought 3 properties when all that was happening, along with 175 Wellington. I also purchased the old JMW Automotive, the 3 houses on Bright Up Street, just up the street from Aaron's, closer to Margaret. I went through site plan application there. At a cost of $1.8 million, I purchased 3 houses, demolished the mall, created this 76 spot parking lot just to try and preserve the tenancies that I had in 130 Weaver Street. As it happens, that wasn't enough because they'd already been punished for the 2 years of coffee floating across their desks, etc.
Well, it's clear that you've gone through a lot of hoops to try to maintain a viable business there. I think the piece I struggle with here is that there is no plan yet for the property at 175 Wellington, other than to become a driveway or a wider driveway. And I can understand that this situation with Weaver Street widening and with all the different factors that you've described in detail that's frustrating. And I get that. I do think though that with a little bit of creativity and like my colleague suggested, that maybe we can find a better viable solution. And so I would like to have a conversation offline about to consider that in a more serious way, if you're open to that.
I don't know what, in terms of what other solution there is. I'm not sure. If you want the house, you can have the house.
I don't want the house. I'm good.
Does it help me immediately with, in 2015, when I bought this house and I was impacted, just so you're all aware, I did submit an application, withdrew it, because as you know, at that time, we're also facing the imminent demolition of the Mayfair Hotel. So when that was going on, I thought it wouldn't be very prudent of me to submit normal application that I would have at that time for demolition of this house, being I was front and center on the Mayfair site. So I've sat on my hands now since 2015. My property is devastated. It is at a financial loss. I'm asking for council to allow this temporary demolition of this house, temporary access to my property, so I can try to fill it, with the bigger picture being some of the things outlined in the consulting report. For that, I'd be more than happy to sit down and have an off the record or
just a longer conversation, maybe, to talk about what. Anyway, perhaps, okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Mr. Nyberg, I do have some questions for myself, and I think what we're missing at part of the report for staff is consideration of the recommendation for committee not to support your demolition request. Is you've addressed some of those issues, but the loss of assessment growth. Keep in mind, you are paying property taxes based on the assessment on the property now, and then if it were to be demolished, that would reduce some of that tax. Taxes that are garnered on that property. What do you have to say on that?
I would suggest again that is a very short-term pain for a long-term gain. The vision I have for that property and for all of the surrounding properties that I've been working on for 2 decades now almost is what I envision there is probably a 6 to 8 story mid-rise type of development, very complementary to what you see in the Krug factory, with brick exterior, punch windows. But so we lose one house and you gain hundreds of houses, so to speak.
And that's fair, and that's why I'm allowing you the opportunity to explain, because you've been short on details.
I ran out of time.
That's fair. That's fair. It's just that we have to be respectful of the other delegations too, because they have to be held to the same regard of 5 minutes, and I gave you that extra time. So that's why through questions, I'm giving you that opportunity to explain exactly what that wider vision is and the time frame. At the end of the day, it can't be just, I'm going to do something soon. What are the hard timelines? And on top of it, I'll have a question of staff that if the committee were to support the demolitions, do we have an ability to hold you to certain timelines as well? So take it away. What do you have for the site? What do you have in mind? Again, what are you proposing that would be built on the site? And what are the timelines that you would be bringing that forward as an application?
Well, I do require at least one more acquisition, 2 at best, but 1 for sure. If I have the one, I am prepared to proceed with that application, and I do have someone diligently working to acquire that property at the moment. So I would say that it's fairly imminent. I've become more aggressive to try and in this last couple of years during COVID to sort of complete some of the assemblies that I've been working on in the city for many years. So this being one of them, I would expect that probably you'd see an application within the next 3 years. I know that Mr. Patterson has been working with the region, working on the official plan limitations, the zoning for the area. He's been working on that on this particular property as well for that block. So I would expect that it would be a short-term use to allow access. But the bigger picture, as I said, Councillor Singh, is to make it a mid-rise building. I've just finished the first mass timber building in our region. It is the tallest in Ontario, and it was quite a learning curve for myself and the consultants and the contractors, frankly. So after I debriefed from that to see where the costs landed versus a traditional type of build, I envision respecting the warehouse district that it's in, respecting the neighborhood. I expect that I would like to keep up as a compromise with the city is to push to keep 130 Weber Street as a structure, and everything else in that block basically be leveled. So that's the bigger picture. 6-story, 8-story brick building, punch windows, traditional like the Krug building. What it would be, as I'm guessing, based on the intensification of Google and the expansion news I'm getting from them, would be support for that, would be housing. I don't personally feel optimistic about the office sector and the devastation that it's gone through and over COVID, and speaking to my tenants, of which 90% of my portfolio is office. I don't see that recovery happening very quickly. I think, if at all, to the level that it was pre-COVID, and the type of use I think is going to change and how offices function change. However, I do recognize that the transit hub will be completed and is now in the planning works. Google is expanding, more housing is required, as we all know, in our region. And that's sort of what I've always envisioned for that area.
Okay, Bernie, so I appreciate that that's your, this would be my last question. I appreciate that this will be your, the grander design for the site. But again, that doesn't, not demolishing it doesn't preclude you not being able to move forward on what you envision.
I understand, but why would you obstruct me otherwise? What, not demolishing it doesn't make any sense.
So that was my question. That was my question. Is the demolition now more so to ancillary benefit to the commercial building that you have, and that's what's needed to keep the site viable?
Yes, sir. For sure. And people from Krug and, as I said, from my building are coming through that narrow aisleway and flying through there now to avoid going around the roundabout entrance. So even Krug's own staff go through there. So it would make it safer. Certainly, if parking is an issue, as I noted, Mr. Saylor said that we'll be parking on it. I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to restrict parking in that. If that's a bone to pick, then I certainly would figure out some way to restrict parking on that lot, other than to provide access to the building, for sure.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we'll have to go to the next delegation. Thank you for the extra information that you helped provide.
Thank you.
Colin, you're up. I believe you wanted to talk on this item. You have 5 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you to the councillors who spoke, and also Mr. Niemer, and for maintaining that property, which I've been watching for the last few years. And as I started to say initially, I've lived across the street for 10 years. I bought that house when I was working in Kitchener-Waterloo at Sun Life. I've invested over $100,000 in fixing up the house. I am a believer in older housing stock. I mean, I originally grew up in Vancouver, where most things are made out of plywood and plaster. I love the homes in Ontario. I've owned several homes in Toronto, older homes, mostly fix them up. So what attracted me was the charm of the area with the typical yellow brick houses, of which 175 Wellington is, which I think is very characteristic of the area that you don't see in many areas around Southern Ontario. I think was a thing when Berlin and Kitchener were growing and thriving. That was a very, I think, distinctive style of architecture at the time, and which is carried over and I love, and why I bought and held on to the house. I certainly hear Mr. Niemer's concerns about tenants. I've had my own challenges with tenants, but there are good tenants out there as well as bad ones. So I think there are other solutions to this. I haven't had a lot of time to prepare much, but I will just say a couple of points. I think that there's adequate access to the property from Brighthought. There is a large gate. I don't see what the issue there is with access. Also, as was raised by the councillors, the lack of the plan going forward, what Mr. Niebuhr is talking about sounds very nice, although like him, it was a bit hellish to go through the major construction of that underpass. And now to have that property across the street sit vacant and then face a number of years waiting and then years of construction would be kind of like a double tap that I'm not sure I really want to endure because I'm getting close to retirement age and I want to enjoy my property. I've developed a large garden in the back, which I have many flowers, which I picked today for my garden. So, I think that the neighborhood really deserves better consideration of what is going on here with this demolition being considered. And this is news to me from what I initially read in the report about the building being demolished. I would advocate the same as the others who spoke earlier about waiting until the plans are made clear, because I think it would be very easy to then just turn around and flip the property. It is in line. My last gig for 2 years was with Metrolinx, which ended last fall. They are big on transit-oriented development and also density and keeping housing stock intact. And I would love to see the house be adapted into another type of property, but keeping the main structure. But I guess that remains to be seen. What else I wanted to get on the docket? I really think there have been some great signs of transformation in the neighborhood as well, and I think it's transitioning and transforming from being a commercial area. There's a lovely little artisanal bakery on the corner now, and that building was redeveloped from kind of not a very desirable building. There's also a little millennial-run butcher forequarter over on Louisa. The path which the region put in behind the house that goes, between the train station and to downtown Waterloo. I think these are all very positive signs. I've seen some of the social problems that existed originally around me change, and in part, I think, because maybe some positive vibes. Initially a teacher bought the house next to me, put a lot of effort and money into fixing it up. Now a hospital administrator owns it. Another real estate agent bought the house on the other side and is apparently working slowly on fixing that up. So I'd like to see that trend continue, but I think it's a very positive trend. And where I've seen in other neighborhoods, in Vancouver, for example, where I worked over a decade ago, similar issues in older neighborhoods, downtown east side, artistic communities, turning things around, working with existing housing stock, painting the multicolors. The Vancouver East Cultural Crawl that goes every year is formed around that neighborhood. So I'd just like to advocate that you give this as much pause and consideration as you can before that building is torn down, please. And I'm directly affected because I'm immediately across the street. So I would appreciate you giving this all due consideration, please.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate you presenting. I see no questions for you from the committee. Thank you for your patience. All right. Any questions of staff? Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, so I was interested in understanding a little bit deeper from Mr. Saylor whether or not it might be, well, first of all, do you think it would be feasible to maybe move a big house, big grand house like that? And have you ever seen that happen before?
I would say through the chair, I wouldn't be a demolition expert, so I'm not sure how that would be actually able to be moved in a safe manner. But if it was possible, I couldn't say. Okay,
and so do you think that? Can you tell me, in your planning expert opinion, whether or not you think that, depending on what proposed plans came in, that you might have been able to support demolition of that house, just as long as there's a plan in place for the property?
Yeah, through the chair, the intent of the demolition control policy is to ensure there is adequate housing stock and not a loss of a unit. So if an application did come in for a larger application along the site, then there may be an opportunity that could be permitted. At this time, it's a little bit premature because we don't know what would be proposed and what the owner would be bringing to those sites. So we are just focused on the existing unit that's there at 175 right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I want to move a deferral until there's an opportunity to discuss options with the property owner further.
When would you want to defer to, Councillor Marsh?
I'll think about it. I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Singh. You know, after hearing Bernie, you know, I do sympathize with you know, his ability to run, you know, that the office building, and I can see you know, making it more attractive for business to be in there and better access. But I also see the, you know, the other side of, well, we don't quite know what's coming yet. So I'm just wondering, you know, I think you alluded to it a little bit when you were answering Councillor Marsh's question, but, you know, once the plan comes forward, do you see any issues or any roadblocks to having that 175 unit demolished?
Again, through the chair, without seeing a formal application, we wouldn't be able to specifically support or refuse the application. It would be kind of preemptive to give that kind of answer. We do want to just reiterate that the loss of the unit as it is right now is specifically to 175 Wellington. We aren't taking into account the access. The private driveway that is being proposed is not considered to be a road. So if it is being used by other companies, other people, that isn't the intent of having a driveway access, and we wouldn't want further parking on site. If a parking facility was on site, it isn't permitted in the R5 zone that's currently designated on the property. It is low-rise residential, and a parking facility is not a permitted use on there. So the property would have to remain vacant and not used for parking.
Okay, because I mean, I do understand too. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the fact that we're talking about the loss of a housing unit, but it's not being used for a housing unit. And as Bernie said, the inside has been damaged, and it's not, you know, an overly attractive residential lot with asphalt all around it. So, you know, how do we come to terms with saying, well, it is a potential housing unit, housing stock, but it's not being used as a housing stock?
The last use that was used on file that the city had was a dwelling unit, so that is still the current use of the property. In the past, it was used for industrial uses, but those uses had ceased and had lost their legal non-conforming status on the property. So because the last known use on the property is a residential unit, that is how we do it, whether it has remained vacant for a couple years or so, that is still the last use on file.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mosher, keep back in. I had a question first, if that's okay. So then I'll give you a chance for your second opportunity. Tim, hearing Mr. Neimer's intentions for the site for a more fulsome design and increased density there, I guess essentially he's wanting a little bit of a leeway of time so that he can continue servicing his the larger commercial building there. So more of a throughway access point through the property. To ensure that we are, not treating Mr. Neimer unfairly because of his honesty and straightforwardness. It's just so as a clarity, the demolition process is, him as a property owner for R5 unit could have shown city planners a design for a house, asked for demolition, got the demolition, demolished the house, and sat on it. And how long can a property owner sit on a demolished property before they have to build if they had submitted a design?
Yep. So the regular kind of demolition control process is a 2-year timeline.
So that would have given a 2-year leeway. Could we not through the, so again, he can go through that red tape right now. If the committee declines, Mr. Neimer is well within his rights to put forward a design to build a home, a residential home, by demolishing this current one and have a leeway of 2 years by demolishing the house. And then he can, have different intentions before that 2-year window. To not have to have him go through jumping those hoops unfairly, could we not put that restriction that he has to put forward an application within that 2 years, and then obviously the same conditions and guidelines apply if he were not to either build on site or put forward an application? Could that not be as part of the approval?
There is no mechanism for once granting demolition control to require them to build the site. They could wait and the property could remain vacant. If they did apply for a demo permit, like you said, it will not be issued until a building permit was ready to be issued as well. So they would also have to apply for a building permit for the new unit and basically be ready to go with that building permit.
Tim, when someone applies for a building permit, do they have to move forward with the building permit?
It is ready to be issued. So whenever they are ready to get it, if they leave it through the in the system, then I'm not sure how long that timeline waits for.
Yeah, I'm just hearing kind of a bureaucratic process of it. And that's why I was trying to see, is there a planning mechanism that if a demolition approval is received or given, that we can try to hold them to that 2-year window? And if they don't build within 2-year window, that again, same ramifications apply to anyone else who wants to demolish and build on a site.
So there would, like I said, the only mechanism is that 2 years, but there would be, if it isn't built within that 2 years, there's I believe it's a $20,000 credit that's put on the property if they haven't developed after that 2-year timeline. Could
we put that condition on this if the committee were to approve it? Or is that automatic?
It would be automatic as part of the demolition control process.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Councillor Marsh, back to you.
I'm a little confused by that part of the conversation. I mean, we do have planning policies in place and bureaucratic processes, albeit, full of red tape. As much as we want to get rid of as much red tape as possible, but still they're there for a reason. We do need to be respectful of that process and not suggest that, oh, well, we're going to do one thing. We're going to say we're going to do one thing and not do it. We're going to just do something else. Like that's not
Marsh, that
what
wasn't
the for. But anyway.
that wasn't my line of questioning. My line of questioning was, had Mr. Neimer wanted to go in that avenue, that was available to him. Instead, he's being forthcoming and saying, I'm wanting to demolish because I have larger intentions for the site. And I was getting clarity as any property owner, what is the mechanism of them applying for the demolition? So I'm not trying to say we should circumvent the red tape or the bureaucracy, I wanted to outline that there was another avenue for the property owner. He chose to be more clear and transparent. That's all.
Right, okay, so thank you for that clarification. My understanding is that this house is kind of is not the type of thing that the property owner wants to own anymore. They don't want to have a rental property because it's been a headache in the past, and so they just don't want to have it anymore, but they want to retain the property and have much bigger plans. So for future. But I don't see why we don't just wait until those plans are in place and then go ahead and give permission. And if in the meantime there is a more creative solution that we like, yeah. So I'm going to actually not going to propose any deferral. I think that what staff is proposing is actually appropriate. And then in the meantime, if there are additional ways that we can work with Mr. Neimer, who I think has done a terrific job on many of his other properties. I have no. This is not I'm not in any way suggesting that the property owner is anything but very respectable. I just think that we should follow the rules as it stands. So I will withdraw that. That idea. Thanks.
Okay. Are any other comments before I call the vote? Can I get a mover for the staff recommendation then? Councillor Johnson? All those in favor for the staff recommendation? 6. And those opposed? 2 opposed, and the staff recommendation for refusal carries. Thank you. And we are on to item number 3. And before we begin, I would note that a written submission on this matter has been received from Paul Burton from MHBC Planning, Urban Design, and Landscape Architects. Mr. Tim Delagini has a presentation for 5 minutes, and as the presentation proceeds, Councillor Marsh, if you can just take over as chair. I just have to excuse myself for about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Donaghy?
Thanks, Councillor Marsh. Thanks, members of council and Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak to you today about the regional official plan review and the growth scenarios. Next slide, please. So the objectives of I'm hoping to get out of today's presentation is to help build a level of understanding about what the growth scenarios are and what the land needs assessment process is about as it pertains to the regional official plan review. Present to you the evaluation criteria that the region has forwarded about how we might evaluate those growth scenarios and potential lands for urban boundary expansions. We're seeking council endorsement of staff level comments and discuss to you a bit about the next steps in the ROP review process. Next slide, please. So this study's been ongoing. It was kicked off in August of 2018. Been really happening in earnest since 2019 in a 4-step process with technical background really happening up until recently. We're now moving into stage 3 of this process, which talks about evaluation of growth scenarios, and we're tracking towards an update of the regional official plan with an amendment approved by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing by July of 2022. Next slide, please. So this slide shows in a sort of graphical way how various studies align and work together to come to a preferred scenario and a preferred growth plan. So it's working with the intensification strategies, the major transit station area, and the employment strategy. I reported to council on those items in March, and council endorsed staff's comments at that time. Right now they're working through designated greenfield analysis and a housing strategy component. That comes together in a land needs assessment, which really looks at how much land is needed to achieve the growth targets that are set out in the regional official plan to grow to 2051. And those sort of pie shapes are my assessment of how far along I think those various components are, just conceptually to show you about how far along we are in the process. And again, all these pieces are required in order to come to a final regional official plan amendment that sets the stage for growth to 2051. Next slide, please. So what is a land needs assessment and growth scenarios? So the province and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe has a technical guidance document called the Land Needs Assessment Methodology. And what it asks upper tier and single tier municipalities to do is look at several scenarios that vary rates of intensification and density in greenfield areas to see what that means in terms of the build out of the community. And when I say intensification, I mean what percent of residential development that's happening over the life of the plan is happening within the built boundary, which is roughly, you know, the extent of the urbanized area of the region as it existed in 2006. And that's the 50% intensification target that you may be familiar with. The other component here is density of the designated greenfield area, which is that area outside of the built boundary that can be developed either for community areas, which are homes, neighborhoods, commercial areas, office development, as well as employment areas. And that in the growth plan needs to be a minimum of what we call 50 residents and jobs per hectare. So that's how they measure density in the growth plan. And the region's proposed 4 scenarios: a base case that it's the minimum rate of intensification, about 50%, and 60 residents and jobs per hectare in the designated greenfield areas. Those 3 other scenarios, scenarios 1, 2, 3, increase those rates of intensification and those rates of density or levels of density in the designated greenfield area. And when you go through and do the math, that will generate some amount of land required in terms of designated greenfield area to accommodate growth to 2051. And generally, the higher rate of the intensification and the higher the density of greenfield development, the less designated greenfield area is required to accommodate growth. So the region's prepared these 4 scenarios. The land needs assessment goes through, does the math on how much land is required for both community areas and employment areas, and then evaluates the scenarios to come out with a preferred scenario that the region can go forward with in developing the further growth related components of the plan. The outcome of that will be potentially an adjustment to the urban boundary of the region within Kitchener and other areas, and potentially going out to the area of the countryside line that was established at the time of the last regional official plan review. Next slide, please. So here's a few more details on the scenarios. So there I talked a bit about the intensification rate in each one, the designated greenfield area density targets as measured in persons and jobs or residents and jobs per hectare. And the result of that, currently in the region, there's about 2,527 hectares of vacant designated greenfield land. That's land that exists today and is designated in the regional official plan and likely the lower tier official plans as slated for future development. To give you an idea of what does 2,500 hectares look like, that's about 63 farms of about 100 acres in size. It's about 40% of the whole land area of the city of Waterloo. So currently there's a lot of designated greenfield area that's already identified in the regional official plan. So what these scenarios are looking at, if you look at the second to last and third to last columns there, is as you vary these scenarios, how much land is required in addition to that 2,500 hectares that are already identified. So the base case scenario would require an extra 830 hectares for community areas. And scenario 3, the highest intensity scenario, would be a slight surplus of designated greenfield areas. All 4 of those scenarios are showing a need for an additional 680 hectares of new designated greenfield area for employment lands. Next slide, please. So the region has developed these growth scenarios as well as evaluation criteria. And those evaluation criteria fall under 6 themes around growth management, transportation, infrastructure and financing, agricultural and aggregates, natural environment and protecting our drinking source water, livability, and economic growth. These criteria have a lot more subcomponents that are detailed more in the regional report that I've attached to the report today. The climate lens or climate change considerations cut across really all 6 of these theme areas. Next slide. So the city so far has received fairly limited information on what the details about all these scenarios are in terms of what are the implications in terms of, you know, the housing mix, how many singles, semis, towns, apartments are required. What does it look like in terms of how much employment we're accommodating in employment lands versus other areas? However, for several reasons, the city or staff are providing preliminary support for scenario 3, which is that highest density scenario, and it would have a small surplus of designated greenfield area already existing. So that would result in no urban boundary expansions, either within the city of Kitchener or anywhere else for community areas. In all cases, staff understand and support the need for expanding the urban boundary for employment lands. That's critically important to maintaining our economic viability and expanding and attracting new businesses to the region to keep our economies vibrant. Some of the reasons why staff are in preliminary support is that these targets are fairly reasonable and achievable. So the city or the region is already meeting 54 residents and jobs per hectare in terms of the development that's occurred outside that built boundary since 2006. And that's at a rate of 96% grade related housing, so single, semis, and towns. It doesn't take much intensification to achieve higher levels of density in the designated greenfield areas. Also, the rate of intensification, the trends are upward in Kitchener and region-wide. Already, the region is at 50% rate of intensification over the last 15 or so years. Bringing that up to 65% seems fairly reasonable. It's also fairly well aligned with Council's earlier position on intensification. In its last official plan update, Council endorsed a target that increased the rate of intensification phasing up to a rate of 70% in the years 2026 to 2031. So this is the proposal in the most aggressive scenario is below that Council endorsed position. In terms of finance and infrastructure, so higher rates of intensification make efficient use of the existing infrastructure that we have. That's good in terms of making good use of that, not expanding unnecessarily. It's also sound from a financial perspective. So development charges are fairly good at covering the capital cost of growth for new infrastructure. But the cost of maintenance and renewing that infrastructure when it comes to the end of its life cycle are primarily borne by ratepayers and taxpayers. So that's the roads, the sewers, the pumping stations, the water mains, etc. Higher rates of intensification make good use of that existing infrastructure and don't need to expand that linear infrastructure into the countryside. In terms of transportation and complete communities, higher rates of density and higher rates of intensification are really well suited to higher rates of walking, of cycling, of transit use, of leveraging our existing investment in LRT and potentially future investment in higher order transit. The rates of density that are proposed today are not enough to achieve frequent bus service, sort of 5-minute service. That's in and around the 80 residents and jobs per hectare number. So as we think about Council's declared climate emergency and our need to sort of not contribute to the climate crisis anymore than we have to, transportation is going to be a critical component of that discussion. Transportation accounts for 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Also, denser communities and intensification support themselves to renewable energy a little bit better. Things like district energy are well suited to higher rates of density, both in intensification and in new greenfield areas. And it goes without saying that the less we expand the urban boundaries, the more agricultural land we have available in the region to feed us. So in terms of the evaluation criteria, I think that the ideas that the region have put forward are sound. There is additional value, staff think, in further quantifying those evaluation criteria, which are currently qualitative. We think it would help. We think it would help in terms of transparent decision-making, but the financial piece, the climate piece, the complete communities and transportation piece, housing choice and affordability, we think are all really important criteria that should be weighted heavily as we go through and evaluate both those growth scenarios and those requests for urban boundary expansions. Next slide, please. So where are we at in the process? You'll recall that I reported to you in March and council endorsed staff level comments on major transit station areas, employment areas, intensification, the climate directions and affordability analysis. Today, we're seeking council endorsement of the growth scenarios and our preliminary suggestion that scenario 3 should be the preferred scenario and comments around the evaluation criteria. So the region had asked for comments by the end of July, so we're in a little bit late, got an extension on that. That's critical to select that preferred growth scenario in order for the region to release a draft land needs assessment, which is that more fulsome evaluation and analysis in September. So we'll come back to the council again in late 2021 as we start seeing what the draft policies look like, what the allocations are like in terms of population employment for the city of Kitchener. We're expecting to do that through a council strategy session. So there are several more opportunities for council to weigh in on this process. The region is hoping to adopt a regional official plan amendment to address these growth related components of the growth plan and set up the growth scenario to 2051. And that would be required for provincial approval of the amended ROP by July of 2022. And that's a hard deadline that's set in legislation. The region is pushing off the growth related components of this project, of this ROP review until after the growth related one, sometime in 2022. After all those components of the ROP are completed, the city will need to update its official plan to conform to the ROP and do the more detailed implementation and planning of how we're going to meet those employment and population projections that will come through the ROP process to 2051, and that will follow along with updating our zoning bylaw to 2024. So that concludes my presentation for now. Thank you for your interest and attention.
You're on mute.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and thank you, Mr. Donaghy, for this presentation. It's certainly, it's so incredibly important, and I don't think that maybe we all realize exactly how important what we're looking at right now is. So, one of the questions I had was, as you mentioned, right now the stage of the process that we're in is the analysis of the growth scenarios. And I've really been thinking lately about where we are with commercial real estate and whether or not after COVID, if businesses will return to the offices that they had before, whether there's going to be a major shift. As we're hearing, people are looking to be able to have the option to work from home, etc. I'm wondering how much the region has taken into account what we don't know at the moment in terms of what that shift might be and the amount of commercial real estate that will be available that is around transportation. They're mainly in the downtown and built up areas and really well serviced. So if you can comment on that would be great.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. The region has drafted what's called an employment strategy technical brief that tries to decide or answer some of those questions about what is the future of work. Admittedly, they're not sure. Nobody's sure. At a high level, I don't think anybody knows that report tries to make some educated guesses about where those trends are headed. I also would mention that as part of the engagement on the regional official plan review, the region convenes a summit among experts in planning from the region of Waterloo, and that outputted some of those decisions and conversations. But to your point, directly, what does it mean in terms of the opportunity for intensification or repurposing commercial lands for potentially residential or similar uses? That idea is mentioned notionally and qualitatively in the employment strategy in terms of coming up with a firm number. I don't recall what kind of adjustments were made versus business as usual, because this entire project has really occurred during COVID. So there isn't a comparison in the documents that I've seen of what would the need be without COVID and with COVID, though I do see lots of discussion in that work that they try and address that given all the uncertainties that are ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Donaghy, I didn't quite hear you. Did you say that most of this work has been done during COVID, or was it pre-COVID?
Mostly during COVID.
Okay. So it's probably safe to say that there hasn't been as much work done around this piece as perhaps we need to do,
Through you, Chair Singh, it's an unenviable position to try and understand what's the 30-year implications of COVID on work when we're 18 months in. I don't know if I could do a better job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm trying to wrap my head around this because this is a bit outside my area of understanding, so I'll preface with that. But supposing you had a crystal ball and the total demand for new development exceeds the projections, would that change your recommendation in this report?
So through you, Chair Singh, the preferred growth scenarios is not just about reacting to the market, but it's about setting policy directions and our intention as a region and a city of how we want to grow. So certainly it needs to be responsive and reactive to the market and trends, housing choice and affordability, the need for employment lands, but it also is the area in which we decide how we want to grow as a community. So I don't think it's a technical answer.
Okay, so in other words, I'm still a bit unclear then. So I'll give you an example. I've done a little bit of reading. Scotiabank released a report recently that indicated that the number of homes per 1,000 residents in Canada is lowest among the G7, and they actually included our region in that, and we're among the lowest in Canada. And my napkin math tells me we're 25% behind per 1,000 residents the number of homes. So what I want to know is, would your recommendation in this report be affected at all or be changed, assuming that we wanted to close that gap?
Through you, Chair Singh, thank you, Councillor Davey, for the clarification. That helps me. So regardless of which scenario is selected, in all these scenarios, we will plan to meet the housing needs to 2051 that are forecasted by the province. The question now is where is that growth located? Is it located outside the urban area primarily, or is it inside the current urban boundary primarily? How much of that is going to happen within the already designated greenfield area, and how much might we need to add to the designated greenfield area? But in all circumstances, the ROT policy will and has to plan to achieve all of the forecasted growth that's coming to the region.
Okay, so approving this policy then does not, I guess my fear is cutting off the potential for growth in both boundaries, I guess, should we need it. So you're saying that it would be adaptive to that at some point? Like if we close off the urban boundary, for example, at this point, we make that recommendation to the region, how would that become reopened should we start seeing greater demand or greater growth?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair Singh. So fundamentally, regional official plans are meant to be updated every 5 years or at another interval set up by the province. This time it's about 10 years. It need not be the case. But yes, at the time of their next official plan review, we'll reconsider that based on contemporary trends at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I wasn't expecting to have questions to staff until after the delegations because there's, I don't know, there looks like there's several delegations. But anyways, I'll just ask a few preliminary questions. With regards to the region, how much work is left with the region and what they need to do?
Through you, Chair Singh, there's a fair bit of work left to do. So they'll need to apply the growth criteria or the evaluation criteria to the growth scenarios, pick a growth scenario, advance the land needs assessment that provides population employment both to municipalities and to different areas of municipalities, so major transit station areas, greenfield areas, urban growth centers. They'll also need to draft policies around employment, major transit station areas, etc. So there's quite a bit of work left for the region to do.
Okay, so it sounds like to me we're giving an opinion when there's a ton of work left by the region to actually know what kind of opinion that we should give. It seems like we're a little ahead of the game. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the region had asked for feedback on the preliminary growth forecast by July 30th. We got an extension until this council cycle. But really, we do have limited information, but the region will be advancing a preferred growth scenario in the way they've organized the project. So the opportunity we have is to provide our advice and to influence that preferred growth scenario now. We can revise that advice as more information becomes clear or as we get more information released by the region. But really the region is asking for that feedback now in order to move ahead with their project, which is under a very tight timeline. That doesn't mean that we can't revise our advice as we learn more, and I think we probably should.
Okay. It still doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not sure why they're asking us for input when they're still going to do all these studies and then come back and say, want us to revise it. It seems like it's a little backwards to me. But anyways, so again, you'd mentioned you based your projection on what criteria again? I know you've raced through that just through a few things that we worked on.
Sorry, Councillor Ioannidis, could you clarify which projection you're
so
talking
about? The projection of density, I noticed you put the highest projection of density. I'm just wondering why you chose that route and not something in between or something, or even waited to hear what the analysis is by the region. So why did you put forward that highest portion of density?
So several reasons that are outlined in the report. There's the financial and infrastructure reasons. There's the climate reasons. There's the strategic growth reasons. Yeah, so they're identified in quite a bit of detail. It's pretty well aligned with trends that are already underway with council's previous positions on these kinds of matters. Even though it's the highest, it is not, in my opinion, a high growth scenario. Recall maybe in March, the council asked the region to consider 100% intensification scenario. This is less than that. So still, scenario 3 continues to forecast growth in the vast majority of those 2,500 hectares of existing designated greenfield area. So in the absence of more information, we provided this opinion based on the information that we had at the time, planning principles, the city's stated interests over time, and reasonable people can disagree about what's appropriate in there. Council can certainly amend those comments, but that's how we got to where we are.
Okay.
Those items are itemized in the report.
Okay, because I'm a little concerned about the target because To me, it sounds like we're going to have really high intensification in these greenfield areas. So are we like going to have like I don't know what that balance in that mix is going to be. It sounds like it's going to be really intense. And so what I want to hopefully try to avoid is communities like Breslau setting up outside of Kitchener, and basically having the same respect as being in Kitchener, but living in a township. So I'm just a little concerned about the makeup with regards to what this may mean in those greenfield areas. Are we talking all mid-rises now, or like what are we talking about here?
Through you, Chair Singh, no, I think the targets that are in there in terms of 60 persons and jobs per hectare in the designated greenfield area, we can get there with a mix of single detached, semi-detached townhouses and apartments. So it's interesting to note in the history of development of the designated greenfield area over the last 15 or so years, we're already at 54 residents and jobs per hectare, with 96% of that housing being those grade related forms. So small increases in the amount of apartments in the designated greenfield area have the opportunity to crank up that density pretty significantly.
Okay,
It doesn't need to be all high rise and mid rise to get there.
Okay, I'll have further questions when I hear from the delegations with regards to see if they have any other concerns that may be pertinent to whatever this has to come by with your studying stuff. So I'll wait till that time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hernandez. And to your point, that is a typical procedure where we wait to ask questions of staff after delegations, but this is a very preliminary process of the ROP review. And again, there are a lot of moving parts, and I wanted to make sure that committee members have full clarity of what the comments that are being forwarded and the staff perspective as we hear comments from the delegation, so that we're better aware of where those concerns are coming from, stemming from, and how they align with the staff comments. And there'll be opportunity if you want more clarification after the delegations as well. So don't worry. Councilor Vanovic? Oh, sorry. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, and thanks, Mr. Donegani, for your presentation. I think building on the questions that have already been touched on, I understand that this initial deadline is the 31st, but as even you've indicated, there's still a fair bit of information that we're looking for. And so I'm wondering, is there a scenario, quite frankly, where potentially council doesn't take a position this evening, where you share information with us, we receive it, staff certainly at a staff level can make their comments, but that as a city, we don't officially make a position until we better understand the full picture with the missing information that you've identified, and that I think we're going to hear about from some of the others today, some of the delegations, and then actually formalize our position.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, to the mayor, that's certainly a possibility. So as I said, the region's timelines are tight in order to complete this project. As I understand it, they will be advancing one preferred growth scenario into the land needs assessment. So from my estimation, right now is the opportunity for council to weigh in on what we think that growth scenario should be in terms of that next stage of the process. If council elects not to provide an opinion right now, I'd suggest that we're then leaving it to other stakeholders to provide that influence and electing not to do it ourselves. That's within certainly the range of possibility. I'd suggest that in terms of the decisions that we make as a community, where the countryside line goes, where the urban boundary goes, is amongst the most consequential planning decisions we'll make. And we have an opportunity to make that decision or influence that decision once every 10 years.
So is it possible that part of our position could in fact be that, you know, we have some concerns around being asked to take a position at this point in time without having all of the information available, and ask that the region come back to us for a formal position later on?
Through the chair, Tim, I may jump in here. I think that's a reasonable position as long as the region understands that the expectation is that that's the expectation amongst all stakeholders. We operate in a public venue, whereas, you know, the development industry and other stakeholders that may have interests in seeing the Countryside line move don't operate in that venue. And so if they're submitting comments and there's nothing from the municipality or from the public that's being considered on this, then it does put us at a disadvantage in the long run in terms of fiscal responsibility, meeting our climate goals and other objectives.
So I guess just as one final follow-up for now, and maybe there'll be more later. And I hear what you're saying. I guess what I'm trying to look for is, you know, is there a scenario where we can provide some preliminary information, but make it abundantly clear that this is based on the information that, quite frankly, you know, we all are acknowledging is lacking from the region right now, and trying to formulate a position based on that.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh. I attempted to position my comments that way, where at the top of, I guess, page 17, I said the city's not yet received updated intensification strategy that addresses previous comments, designated green area analysis, financial impact analysis to provide detailed comments. However, staff offer the following preliminary comments and observations in support of scenario 3 for the region's consideration. I'd be happy to beef up that preamble.
Okay, as I said, those are all the questions I have for now. I may have more later. Thank you.
Yes, and that's fine. And I'm sure there may be more clarification from the delegations, but I think getting some of this clarity would help as we hear them. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Do we know where the development industry is standing, and have they been able to give input on this?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, there's several committees, steering committees, technical advisory committees, municipal working groups, lots of outreach through Engage WR, one-on-one conversations that have happened with the region and developers, I know, and many other stakeholders. So yes, there's lots of opportunity for the development industry to engage with the region on this multi-year process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll go to the delegations. First up is Robin Brown from IBI Group on behalf of Schlegel Urban Villages. We're ready when you are.
Sorry about that. I got cut out and I didn't know it was me first.
No, that's
hi,
okay.
everyone.
You
Good
have 5
evening,
minutes. Good evening.
Chair, members of council and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Robin Brown. I'm a director and senior practice lead at IBI Group in the Real Estates Economics and Planning Group. I'm a land use planner and professional land economist. In this capacity, I'm actively participating in 8 growth management studies across the Greater Golden Horse Show. Also in my capacity as a land economist, I provided input into the growth management components of the latest growth plan and the new land use methodology as a member of the Province of Ontario's Technical Working Group. IBI Group was retained in 2020 by Schlegel Urban Developments to monitor and participate in the region of Waterloo's Municipal Comprehensive Review, along with SGL Planning and GHD. IBI and the consultant team has contributed to several submissions to the region regarding the growth scenarios and the evaluation criteria, highlighting issues and concerns that our team has with the failure of the region of Waterloo to provide the background technical work which underpins the various scenarios. The purpose of this deputation is to provide input into the staff report of July 28, 2021, which addresses the regional growth scenarios, and staff's endorsement of scenario 3, which sees no boundary expansion. In my professional opinion as a land economist, I believe it is premature to support any of the scenarios presented in the regional preliminary growth scenario, as there has not been sufficient technical details provided to assess if these scenarios are feasible. In particular, 1, the provincial land needs assessment methodology requires that a market-based approach is employed to determine housing need, and that housing forecast by dwelling type is completed to assess a community land area needs. IBI Group does not believe that housing mix has been appropriately addressed in any of the growth scenarios, as insufficient detail on housing type and persons per unit have been provided. 2, given that the housing mix by type isn't provided, it is impossible to assess the market-based approach was used in assessing the community area land need in the base case. If sufficient land is not made available to accommodate market demand, this may negatively impact future housing choice and affordability in the region if demand outpaces supply. 3, scenario 3 would require a significant shift in housing mix in order to meet objectives of no settlement boundary expansion. There is no technical analysis debate that demonstrates this is feasible and what impact this will have on housing choice nor long-term finances of the region. 4, to ensure that the region will allocate sufficient land to projected growth, we have requested the region provide housing forecasts by dwelling type and area municipality to 2051 from each growth scenario. This is yet to be provided, and proceeding with one scenario without understanding the housing mix wouldn't be prudent. 5, the evaluation criteria as currently presented does not provide enough details regarding how the evaluation criteria would be applied to each scenario. Proceeding with a preferred scenario prior to the evaluation is premature. 6, the City of Kitchener staff report for you itself states that more analysis and information is required from the region of Waterloo, with which IBI Group agrees. Despite several written and oral presentations to the region of Waterloo by IBI Group, as well as other professional industry professionals, the required background material which underpin these growth scenarios has not been made public. This should be an open and transparent process. 7, we believe that it'd be prudent for the City of Kitchener to defer the selection or endorsement of a preferred scenario until the region of Waterloo releases the appropriate technical analysis with which objective evaluations can be made on the scenarios based on the criteria. And 8, my client, Schlegel Urban Development, therefore respectfully requests the Planning Committee accepts these City of Kitchener staff comments before you as information only at this time, and defer making an important decision regarding endorsing a preferred growth scenario until such a time as the region of Waterloo makes available the assumptions underpinning the land budget, including things such as housing mix assumptions and persons per unit. I thank you for your time. IBI Group, Schlegel Urban Developments, and the rest of our consulting team look forward to participating in further consultations and hearing any feedback you have. I'm happy to respond to any questions from council.
Thank you, Robin. I'm not seeing any hands up. Thank you for your presentation and your feedback. The next delegation is Maria Kairis. That's from Waterloo Regional Home Builders Association.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know if I could be heard.
No, it's been almost a year and a half and I still can't get used to turning the mic back on. So
Thank you. All right, members of the committee. My name is Maria Caveris and I serve as the president of the Waterloo Region Home Builders Association, or the association as I will refer to it going forward. We are proudly affiliated with both the Canadian and the Ontario Home Builders Associations. In my professional capacity, I'm a professional engineer employed as president of PK Custom Homes, a land developer and home builder. First, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you in regards to the staff report number DSD 2021-127, Regional Official Plan Review Growth Scenarios, dated July 28, 2021. Our association has been the voice of the residential development and construction industry in Waterloo Region since 1946. We are a community of over 180 member companies that are valuable contributors to city building. Our membership is mainly comprised of land development and new home building companies, renovators, engineers, planners, financial specialists, manufacturers, service professionals, suppliers, and trade contractors. Our association is committed to improving affordability and choice for new home purchaser. We do this by interacting positively with government at all levels, and in particular, municipal government, to help create legislation, regulation, and policies that affect the planning, development, and construction of new housing and neighborhoods within Waterloo Region. Since the 1970s, our association has been
your sound has gone away, so not sure if
Can you hear me now?
you can hear us.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
can't hear you.
I can hear.
Yeah, we can hear fine.
Okay, I'm not sure. Can I keep going? Since the 1970s, our association has been consulting through the Kitchener Municipal Liaison Committee to review and provide timely input on important issues affecting new residential development. We have been participating as a stakeholder in the region's lengthy and substantial official plan update, a process which kicked off in November 2019, which leads to a respectful frustration with the lack of notice and consultation with our industry, either through the Kitchener Municipal Liaison Committee or through some other direct forum on the staff report and recommendation. Kitchener staff are asking committee and council to make a recommendation here this evening, which will have profound and long-lasting impacts to affordability, housing supply, and housing choice for many generations to come. And at this time, we have not been afforded ample opportunity to review and discuss the details contained in the report prepared by City of Kitchener staff that was released July 30th. Nor has background information been shared related to the assumptions made for the growth scenario recommended by staff. Furthermore, there is very little information on how the evaluation criteria will be applied, and some of this will require significant technical analysis. To select a scenario without these assessments and the technical work is premature. A few examples of missing information for your consideration are as follows. The region's work does not create a housing forecast, which is the first step in the land needs assessment. This means that potentially there will not be sufficient housing and housing choice in the region. It is especially important to have a balanced growth strategy to avoid undue pressure on inner city neighborhoods and sprawl in the townships. In supporting option 3, there has been no assessment if there is sufficient hard and soft infrastructure capacity to support these densities. This includes the provisions of schools, parks, and community centers, which will be required within the existing built-up areas to support the population. Ongoing consultation, review of the proposed recommendation, and industry participation in key decisions is crucial, especially given the changes in our real estate market over the last 18 months. 2 recent examples in the media that highlight this include Thursday, August 5th, Waterloo Region Record front page read rental market almost unreal. Friday, August 6th, front page headlines. Building renovation permits are among the highest in the province, and detached homes in Kitchener Waterloo see $160,000 yearly rise. While we understand the demands placed on municipal staff and councils and the need to move items forward in an effort to meet submission deadlines while we continue to be challenged due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, without the timely release of appropriate materials, documents, and information, our association cannot ascertain that the recommendations and calculations arrived at are fair or reasonable. Therefore, our association respectfully requests council to consider the following: that the comments included in tonight's staff report and the decision be deferred, and that the decision to endorse staff's report be deferred. Direct staff to provide appropriate access to the materials, documents, and details used in arriving at their recommendations to the industry, and direct staff to identify options for council to consider so that planning can meet the forecasted population that supports housing choice and affordability. In closing, collectively, we need a strong commitment to get more housing supply and choice in the market and create communities and neighborhoods that can respond to the current and forecasted growth in our region. Let's not view population growth as a problem, let's view it as an opportunity. New housing can be a cornerstone solution to climate change, the employment skills gap, and the economy. We welcome
Rise.
work with staff, and I thank you for the opportunity to convey our association's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any hands up for questions. There is one. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and thank you, Ms. Kavaris, for coming in. You had mentioned that there was a lack of communication and engagement between the Home Builders Association. would you, can you elaborate a little further on that? Like, has our staff been connecting with you guys and everything else to come across with what they've portrayed here today in the report?
So we found out about the report at about the same time as the public. There was an email forwarded to our Kitchener liaison group. I believe it was Thursday afternoon. The report was put on your website on Friday. We did not have advance notice of the report or its recommendations prior to it being posted on the website, where typically we are circulated on this information through our monthly meetings, and our meeting that was scheduled just a couple weeks before this report was released was canceled due to lack of agenda items. But this report was not flagged to the industry at all in advance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That appears everyone. Next up is Sam Nabi from Hold the Line Waterloo Region. Sam, welcome, and you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Singh, members of the committee. My name is Sam Nabi. I'm a member of Hold the Line Waterloo Region. Our purpose is to bring together residents, farmers, advocacy groups, developers to support the region's countryside line, which is a part of the official plan that protects our farms, our groundwater, and our natural areas from sprawl. We've held 2 festivals out on farms in Waterloo Region to help people living in the city to experience what it is really that the countryside line and our growth management practices are protecting. I have a few items I'd like to get through, and I'll be as concise as possible. Number 1, I would like to reiterate that we are on the Haldimand Tract. We have a moratorium on development in the Haldimand Tract right now. Both the Haudenosaunee hereditary chiefs, as well as the Six Nations elected band council, are united on this front. So an official plan update can't go ahead in good faith without grappling with these demands and working with the Haudenosaunee Development Institute. The Six Nations have a major land claims case coming before the courts next year. Chief Mark Hill has said that it would not be responsible to allow continued development in an uncertain legal environment. We can also look at the success of land defenders at 1492 Landback Lane, who stopped a new subdivision from being constructed on the Haldimand Tract. Kitchener and much of Waterloo Region also sits on this tract, and it's important for that fact to inform our planning efforts. I'm pleased to see Kitchener staff endorsing scenario 3 in this report, which has the highest intensification rate and no expansion to the urban boundary. Given the choice between 3, I would say, unambitious scenarios, staff are right to favor the one which gets us closest to the goal of transit supportive, complete communities without the huge maintenance costs of sprawling infrastructure. The region's scenario 3 would require new development at about 71 people and jobs per hectare. But to support frequent transit, we need to build at a minimum of 80. So the region's most ambitious scenario actually misses the mark for the bare minimum we need to have a dense, walkable, transit supportive community. We need to aim higher if we have any hope of taking the climate emergency seriously, of building neighborhoods where people of all ages and abilities can live, work, and play. The next point I want to make is about employment areas. And all the scenarios include this 680 hectare expansion for employment areas. This seems like, again, a failure of planning for the next generation of transit supportive jobs that can become part of a complete community. There was a great report from Metro Vancouver that we have forwarded to regional staff a few months ago. This is from 2013, and Metro Vancouver has had policies for the efficient use of industrial land. Their plan shows that even a nominal intensification rate of 10% saves 150 hectares of land from being developed over a 21 period. And you can do this in ways such as building rooftop employee parking to avoid the need for surface parking lots in industrial parks. So we can do better than this. Lastly, I want to note at the end of the region's report, which we're responding to tonight, there are a number of requests for urban area expansions outside the countryside line. and even some that are located within the protected countryside area, which is supposed to be a permanent boundary, a permanent no-go zone. Now is the time when regional staff and council need to stand firmly in support of the countryside line. This policy was created almost 20 years ago. My organization, Hold the Line, has done a lot of advocacy and education around the importance of that policy tool, but now is when it's being tested for real as our urban area bumps up against that boundary. So I'll leave you with this thought. If we falter now and allow these exemptions to go ahead, we might as well have never created the countryside line in the first place. Our values only matter if we stand up for them when they're being challenged. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Waiting to see if there are any questions. I don't see any hands. Thank you very much. Thanks for presenting. Okay, so that brings up the committee back to seeing if there's any clarification questions of staff. There was opportunity to give preliminary questions. If not, I'll also open up for comments as well.
Through the chair, my apologies. We do have one more delegation for item 3, Mr. Pierre Chauvin.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's fine. Mr. Chauvin?
Yes, good evening, Chair Singh and members of the committee. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning, and I'm here on behalf of our client Activa Holdings, Inc. I'm speaking to the submission that my partner Paul Britton had made, and unfortunately Mr. Britton was not able to attend this evening, so I'm pinch hitting for Mr. Britton this evening. Activa owns a significant land holdings in Southwest Kitchener, and this was identified in our submission to the committee. Our client has been engaged in the ROP review process from the beginning, has provided extensive input into this process. And they have a direct interest in the outcome of this ROP review process, given their investment in land and the investment that they made in infrastructure to support the future development of these lands. Given their direct interests, we believe it is utterly important that engagement with Activa and other affected landowners be open and really meaningful. And as you've heard this evening, it has been less than that. Unfortunately, Activa, like the home builders, were not consulted or made aware of this report that was coming to you this evening. Nevertheless, we ask that the committee do the following, and we simply receive the staff report for information and defer making a decision at this time. And 2, that a review of the growth scenarios be considered a later date at such time as the region completes their land needs assessment and in accordance with the province's methodology and evaluation, and an evaluation of the request for urban expansion. Just by way of background, the growth plan requires that the region prepare a land needs assessment to consider housing demand based on a forward-looking forecast, not backwards-looking. And this includes an evaluation of housing supply and housing demand by housing type. The preferred housing mix and density and intensification targets that are put forward by the region are outcomes of the process. They're not inputs into the required process. So effectively, we believe the region is proceeding by way of sort of a backwards approach. Simply put, as you've heard, the required analysis to make an informed decision has not been made available, and the staff have acknowledged this. We have made, as well as you've heard as well from others, a number of requests to the region for information to try to understand the assumptions that have gone into the growth scenarios. And we've, I think, attached to our submission the request that we made several months ago to the region. To date, we haven't received any information. Our requests have gone unanswered. And as a result, it's difficult to really provide meaningful input into these growth scenarios. And given the significance of this issue and what it means to the growth of the region, and particularly Kitchener, comprehensive analysis is warranted, and only through a thorough understanding with respect to a host of interrelation considerations is required. So in summary, many of the assumptions relating to the growth scenarios are not readily transparent, and our information is yet to be made available, as you've heard. The impact of these various growth scenarios will have on achieving a balanced mix on housing and affordability, which are the mainstays of the growth plan, have yet to be evaluated. The land needs assessment needs to be prepared in accordance with a provincial methodology and is yet to be made available to the public. The implications of the various growth scenarios are not understood and we have not fully been analyzed in any available reports to date. And as a result, support for any growth scenario, in our professional opinion, is premature at this time. Those are my submissions, and be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. See if there's any questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mr. Chauvin, for coming in. So the other delegations have basically stated that they would like to see a deferral. Is that the same scenario for yourself, for your clients?
Through Mr. Singh, yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Here, there doesn't seem to be anyone else, so we'll have the committee seeing if they have any further clarification questions of staff. If not, then as I said earlier, open the room for comments as well. I don't see any hands up for questions for clarification. I'll take the opportunity to ask mine. Hearing, of course, questions from my colleagues to staff, and then obviously the delegations as well, especially from the Home Builders Association and developers that focus more so on the outside the urban boundary. Their encouragement to delay to provide comment. Would we be underserving ourselves if we don't get ahead of ourselves to address, of course, the importance and the need for intensification in aspect of future cost related to the municipalities for infrastructure, and as well as how do we meet our targets for reducing green gas reduction overall, and our commitments that this council has made. Development seems to be a big component of that. And if we continue to see urban sprawl, can we see ourselves achieving those targets in that 2030 guideline and 2050 guidelines that we set ourselves for? And on top of it, as additional encouragement proceeds to be on growth happening along the transit line, if there isn't an additional push for density along the transit corridors, does that just extend that period out where there's enough of a, momentum or overall development in our built up areas to support additional investments into transit? So I'll just ask question of staff for clarification on that.
Through you, Chair Singh, was that a question of staff?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you.
It sounded like a preamble to a comment, but there were questions in there.
Thank you, Chair Singh. If I could ask the clerk to go back in the presentation to slide 11, there's an interesting financial example that sort of expands on the analysis that's included in the report. I wonder if we could share slide 11 there.
Is that where it outlines that if, as we see urban sprawl, we have to address at least 5,000 per foot of infrastructure that we would have to rebuild?
Yeah, there's a sort of a graphical example included in the slide deck 11 there that I might share if that's okay. That's the one. So as Chair Singh just mentioned, we articulated in the staff report that the cost of development, the capital cost of development are fairly well paid for by developers. Not entirely, but fairly close. The cost of maintenance and the cost of reconstruction of those pieces of infrastructure when they come to the end of their life are borne by the ratepayer and the taxpayer. So staff and asset management, planning and GIS have done some initial analysis and found that the reconstruction cost is typically about $5,000 a meter up for linear infrastructure and about $36 a year for maintenance of linear infrastructure. So here's two examples of how one might accommodate 790 people. These are real world examples. Obviously, they're two extremes, but they are two real world examples of approved development in Kitchener that both house 790 people. The urban example is about 494 units, 304 units in the suburban because there's more people per household in those larger units. The urban example takes up about 1/3 of a hectare of land. The suburban example about 100 times that. So the existing or the urban development makes use of existing infrastructure about 53 linear meters. The suburban example extends approximately 4.4 kilometers of linear infrastructure. The life cycle cost to replace that is about $250,000 in 60 years when that infrastructure is used up. $250,000 in the urban example and $22 million in the suburban example. The annualized life cycle costs are just below that. The maintenance costs of that infrastructure are of a similar order of magnitude. You can see the tax revenues in both examples are the same. So when we talk about making this existing use of existing infrastructure and financially benefit to the municipality, this is one example that can help color a bit of that conversation. So hopefully that kind of example is the kind of analysis that you were looking for, Chair Singh.
No, it does. And so it's pretty much in summary, it essentially cost almost 60 or so times the multiple of more in suburban development as opposed to urban development.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, wow. And at the same time, the taxation is higher. Okay, so that being aside, again, some of the comments that are being made by the the development community that focus more so in the suburban development is to delay our comments, refer this back to the region, ask for more details on what their essential, the direction that they're going, and delay to provide comments. Do we, and that was my other part of my question, do we underserve ourselves by not getting ahead of the curve in enforcing the need for higher intensification targets because of that financial argument? Or would we be fine if you referred it and waited to make the same comments and rationale at a later time? What's more advantageous for the city?
Through the chair, perhaps if I could take a crack at answering that. I do think it's disadvantageous overall to not submit comments. Should council choose, the reason why we are in front of council is to hear delegations and to hear from any delegation that wish to comment. And there were some process questions that I would like to address at some point. So hopefully a member of council has a question related to that. However, like council could amend the comments that we submit forward. And so, if there's recognizing the region perhaps does need to do more work on their land models, if council chooses to soften that language, but we would advocate that potentially advancing that option 3 as a model to work through the process, as well as any other options that should go through that process, would serve Kitchener Council in terms of understanding that complete picture.
Okay, and thank you. And I have taken enough time, so I'll allow another committee member to ask that question of process so that we have further clarity as well. Mayor Vivanovic.
Thanks, and maybe I will start off by asking that question, because obviously it is a concern that's been expressed. But and maybe staff can help me. I can explain what my understanding is, and staff can indicate if that in fact is the case. This is the region's process. This isn't our process. And so the region is the one doing the consultation. Everyone, including, the delegations we've heard from tonight, will have an opportunity to feed into the region's process multiple times is my take. We're one of those parties, as in a corporation. The city formal through council that has an opportunity to be consulted and provide input, and this is that opportunity. let me end it there. And maybe Mr. Reedman can say from a process point of view that in fact is the case.
And through the chair, and so this is accepted standard practice when municipalities comment on other levels of government's legislation changes. So the regional official plan is the region's project. They are doing engagement. I understand they also have a home builders liaison committee. I'm not sure if they've engaged with that committee or not because it is their process. But we've followed this mechanism for multiple policy tools. So Bill 108 is an example where we've written comments that the City of Kitchener has endorsed. We don't have the ability to publish notice and engage with the wide demographics of our community that make up Kitchener. And so if we just engage with the home builders on another levels of government's policy, we would only be hearing from them, and that would be forming the basis. We'd have a biased opinion that we'd be bringing forward to council for consideration. And so the reason why we bring it forward through a public process like this is so any member of the public, including the home builders or members of the general public or Hold the Line as an example for today, can participate in this process and to help shape the formal comments that are submitted through this process.
So in some ways, this is not unlike when a member of council gives, notice of motion on an issue that we want to lobby the province or the feds for. In this instance, we're lobbying the region in effect. And so it shows up on the agenda. Those who are interested can come, but there generally has not been, some broad consultation ahead of that motion being brought forward by a member of council. Is that, from a simple perspective, what you're saying essentially?
Correct. And we don't have time to publish a notice. Like it would take 2 weeks to get that, and then to get people to come out to that process. So really this is that same mechanism, like a council motion to lobby the province, but we do formalize comments through this process. It's standard practice. We've done it at least 4 times since 2018, since I've been in the role of general manager, mostly to the province at this point in time, because this is the first time that the region has brought forward a piece of policy document that we have the ability to comment and shape.
Now, so, having said that, from a process point of view, I do hear some common themes between both Mr. Donegani's responses earlier, as well as what we're hearing from the delegations, is that there's a whole pile of missing information here. And so it's difficult for us to perhaps take the most informed of positions in the absence of that information from the region. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. However, taking no position at all could leave the city vulnerable and compromised in terms of providing any feedback to the region in the process.
Okay. And so, potentially, depending on what the will of committee is tonight, I mean, nothing is finalized until 2 weeks from now anyway, when it comes back to council. And so I guess we would have an opportunity to rework potentially the message we want to send to the region, if there's a desire by committee to do that.
Through the chair, absolutely, and we'd welcome any council feedback into shaping our formal comments.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. I see there's a number of hands up.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks. I wonder if staff can comment on the scenario 3 being not quite, the comment that was made by Mr. Nabby about how the scenario 3 is not quite ambitious enough to support a transit-friendly, complete streets, complete communities type of city.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh. So in your report on page 18, we've got some of the same data that Mr. Nabby presented about the rate or the intensity of development or the density that's required to support various levels of transit service. So that's frequent bus service, 80 residents and jobs per hectare. That means 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah. 5-minute bus service requires 100 residents and jobs per hectare. So I'm working on the same data that Mr. Nabby is. In terms of complete communities around employment areas. Was that part of your question as well, Chair
Yeah.
Marsh or Council Marsh? Yeah, so employment areas are a tricky one. Not all employment will be accommodated in employment areas. Most population related employment, like in stores, like in offices, will be accommodated in community areas. Those will contribute to that, the density targets that we look at in designated greenfield areas. Employment areas are really those areas that can't be near residential because of the kinds of uses that are there. So manufacturing uses are a classic one. The kinds of densities that we're seeing there in the region's employment strategy are not transit supportive. They're closer to 35 jobs per hectare. We still think that's probably a necessary evil in order to maintain a competitive advantage, to have land ready to meet the needs of employers that have large space needs that are impactful in terms of noise or odor vibration, and are key components of our economy's growth to 2051.
Okay. Now, when you were answering a question earlier that I think Councillor Ioannidis was asking about, what about if we're looking in our suburban areas, does the scenario 3 require more mid-size development and not enough of a diverse range of low-rise development? And your voice, I didn't catch the end of what you said, and so sometimes I think it's the volume on my on my screen, but I couldn't hear what you said. If you could just summarize, like, will scenario 3 allow for a broad range of housing types to be built and still reach those density targets?
Through you, Chair, saying yes, absolutely. That's 65 units and per persons and jobs per hectare target in community areas is very consistent with a range of housing types from singles up to apartments.
Okay. Thanks. I might have comments later, Chair Singh. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I just wanted to touch upon Mr. Reedman's comments. If we don't provide input, how at this point, how would it adversely affect us?
Yeah, I could wait for Justin Keehan, but my initial opinion, through you, Chair Singh, is that the region will advance the preferred growth scenario with or without the city's comments. So this project will go on. We may have some reservations about the order of operations in the process that they're undertaking, but it is fundamentally their project. They've asked for comments by the end of the month. And I believe it's an important opportunity now to influence that process. I'm not sure about our ability to influence the process if we were to defer it to a later date, given the timelines of the regional project.
So a worst case scenario, as staff, you were recommending 100% intensification or a proposal, correct?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the proposal from March, where we said we think the city should consider, or the region should consider, in a scenario with no urban boundary expansion, is very consistent with scenario 3. That 100% intensification scenario would mean that none of the currently designated greenfield lands could be developed. So that would be taking those 2,500 already designated hectares off the table. We don't think that's reasonable or feasible. So I think in terms of community areas, the region's scenario 3 comes very close to meeting the intent of what council asked the region to consider back in March.
Okay, and right now it's roughly around 50% per hectare, correct?
Yeah, so the region-wide, their analysis says that 54 residents and jobs per hectare has been achieved across the DGA. We're somewhat higher in Kitchener.
Okay, so in my opinion, if we gave no voice or concern right now, it's going to be higher than 54%, which is exactly what you're trying to state right now.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the base case scenario is 60, and scenario 3 is 65. So there's not a ton of spread there.
Okay, so I don't understand what's the detriment if we say, because I personally am not comfortable with giving a judgment call on something when the region has to do numerous studies. Like that's their wheelhouse, that's their thing. So why are they asking us for sort of information when they're already predisposed with the decision at 60? So to me, it seems, again, like I think the delegations were accurate in saying this is premature.
Through the chair, if I could just jump in on Tim's previous answer. We don't know what other stakeholders have commented for what model they would like to see advanced. And so, staff were providing our technical advice to council on whether to move that forward. If we don't advance any of our comments at all, there's other important comments in there, like if we're expanding the built area for employment lands, that at least sustainability features be tied into that, so LEED or other features. And so there are other important comments in that document that should be advanced. Council could choose not to advance a position on any of those, but if council chooses not to advance any comments at all, it becomes more problematic on just providing feedback at this time to the region.
Okay, but we can actually, approve those types of comments, but not give a density target, because it seems to me the density target is the key number here.
Correct, or through the chair, we don't know where the region will land, so we could ask them to model a couple different scenarios, in addition to asking them to do additional work that is required for, that we've commented on and the industry has commented on as well. So we could ask them to advance a couple scenarios forward to keep that work going so the council could make an informed decision, but not necessarily say that that's our preferred approach at this time, but ask for them to at least advance that model forward so that council could make that informed decision at a later date.
Well, that I think would be a good idea, but let me think about that a little further.
Councillor Marsh, you have your hand up again. Did you want to come back in, or is it from a previous comment?
No, I would like to make some comments, but so I'll just cue back in when it's comment time.
Yes, thank you. There still seems to be some clarification that's requested of staff. Mayor Vivinovic, of staff or comment?
Well, I was actually going to put something on the table, which maybe people could comment on, and we can see if it needs some further morphing or not. I think a number of us, including some of the folks that we've heard from, and including some of the information presented by staff, have suggested that there is a lack of information from the region, and it's impacting our ability to give the best advice possible. I think as a council and as a region, we have been very strong in terms of the countryside line historically. And I'm not hearing anything suggesting that is something that's being questioned here. So I think instead of actually approving something tonight, I'd actually like to refer this back to staff between now and council 2 weeks from now, and to really come back with two segments, really. One that sort of talks about the other issues that are important that we want to make sure are on the table, regardless of what position council may or may not take on specifically the density targets. And secondly, I think where Mr. Reedman was going there, and the notion of potentially I think it was Mr. Reedman, might have been you, Mr. Donegani, so I apologize. But drafting something that expresses concerned about the lack of information, that we're not prepared to formalize a final position, and are looking for a few scenarios going forward, and seeing if that could be drafted up and brought back on Council Day 2 weeks from now.
Mayor Vanovic, I do, as the chair, like your suggestion of referring to council. I'm hearing varied kind of opinions in the direction of process to take. I think we're probably on the same message point, of all those I've heard speak so far. And at the same time, that would give staff some opportunity to, frame those comments accordingly on that council day. And from what I'm hearing from Mr. Reedman as well, staff seem to be very amenable and open to take feedback, and they want to make sure that the feedback being provided to the region is clear of what the intent of this committee and council is. So if we make our comments accordingly, I'm sure then in that interim period, staff can put their mind to general consensus and formulate that into actual feedback to the region, and that's something that we can then vote on come council day. I'm guessing that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, but I think one thing that is important, I want to just reiterate what Mr. Reedman was saying earlier, is that this is our opportunity to respond with a City of Kitchener technical point of view. There's some question around, do we have the information to have the best technical point of view? And I think we're hearing from others who are saying they don't have the information so that they can provide their technical point of view to the region. So I think part of the strength of our position needs to be to ensure that that information is in fact readily available for everyone, so that they can formulate those positions in a meaningful way. I just don't want to I don't want to take ownership for something that's a regional process. So I think we just need to be careful that in terms of, a number of the delegations we've heard from, their point of input is to the region primarily. We're a secondary point of input as we formulate our own advocacy strategy.
Agreed. So with that, and I'm taking that as a referral motion from Mayor Vanovic, and I'm okay with that. I will take comments, and then we can vote on the referral. And if that passes, then that's the direction that staff are getting to take those comments and then formulate that feedback to the region, and that will be provided hopefully a little bit advance of the council meeting, so that we have some time to consume what staff have formulated. With that, I'll open up for comments. Councillor Marsh.
Thanks very much, Chair Singh. Tonight has been kind of an interesting meeting where we're talking about this report that's giving comments on a regional project. And all of the delegates were, in one way or another, referring to the country sideline and whether or not we have the capacity to hold the line, or if we need to look at a different scenario. And I don't think that the City of Kitchener in any way has ever indicated that we don't want to hold the line. And so I would like that to be a part of staff. I'd like to hone our commentary about that, if committee agrees, because I think we need to be clear on our position. And we can use our strategic priorities that the community has given us. We have that benefit that I don't know if it's matched by any other local area municipality or even the region, in the way that we do such broad and deep public consultation every 4 years. We know what the community wants. We know affordable housing, and we know the climate change crisis are two of our community's top priorities. And so, as much as the report refers to, points to many of our priorities that we list in our strategic plan are relevant, I wonder if we can dig a little deeper and find ways to say how our position about the region's growth plan are guided by what the community tells us. So as stewards of the community, I think it's also really important that we comment about the fact that if we grow quicker in the suburban areas than we grow in the urban areas, which the province won't even allow anyway, but if we did do it as much as we could, our costs are astronomical, and we need to look after the taxpayers' purse string. We hold the purse strings, and so we need to make sure that we are accountable to all. And one last comment, I'm a little bit mystified by how our own affordable housing strategy, which includes study towards inclusionary zoning in the major transit station area boundaries. I'm mystified by how we have to wait forever until we define those boundaries. I would love for in our commentary to comment on that and say, hey, let's get permission on those as soon as possible so we can move forward on actually digging deeper and being able to really, for real, take a stab at addressing our affordable housing crisis. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Gravanovic seems to be ahead, but again, he is the one who's referring, so I'll give him an opportunity afterwards. But go ahead, Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I just want to thank all the delegates for coming in tonight, and great to hear the comments from my fellow councillors. As the mayor said, this is a regional process. We're asking we're asked for input on it, but it's really necessary that we get fuller detail and be able to make a proper, informed choice of our preferred scenario. So I will support the deferral.
Just to be clear, Councillor Schneider, it's not a deferral, it's more of a referral. So giving opportunity for staff to hear comments of the committee. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Singh. I will agree to with the referral. I think it gives a little extra time for everyone to discuss further what the options may be. And to be honest, I think we need a little bit more information to make a holistic decision, in my opinion. I prefer to have all the information available before saying, hey, let's just do this, and not know what the consequences are. And I'm all for intensification, as everybody knows, but it's not an all ends and beyond means for our strategy. I think we need to still look at a more balanced and mixed approach, and I think hopefully in the next 2 weeks that we can get some more concrete answers as to what specifics are needed to give a more appropriate opinion. But as of right now, if I don't see the information there, and if that's not the case within a couple of weeks, I'm definitely going to be pushing for a deferral on a few of the options.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I've kind of been quiet on this because there's so many questions that I have, and I don't think that we'd be capable of responding them here at this table. So, but I also question, I'm willing to support a referral, but I wonder if we'll have any more information by the time the council meeting comes along to actually really modify our position on this. I guess that's up to staff to say, but it just seems like there's the problem isn't with staff at the city level, it's at the regional level, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to get that information to the table to be able to make a more educated response. So like I said, I have a lot of questions, but I don't even know where to begin because I don't think they're questions that can be answered here. So I think, the really important issues have been mentioned. hold the countryside line, and I agree that, I think the city's been very clear on that. When it comes to affordable housing, yes, we don't have the inclusionary zoning policy or bylaw adopted yet. We talk about transportation every 5 minutes. Well, even in the more intense areas of the city, we don't have bus service every 5 minutes. So I'm not quite sure how and why that's going to happen in the Greenfield area. So there are a lot of questions that arise. The climate change thing, like exactly what's the approach? So I'll just say yes, I'm willing to support the referral, and I guess hope that some more information comes available somewhere, somehow. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh, you have your hand back up again. Okay, all right. I'll quickly just try to make some of my points. And I appreciate that, I think all of us still have more questions in mind and clarity in the direction that the region is going to take. It would be, I think, would have been helpful if the region was more so clear in the direction that they are leaning towards, so that we can be more poignant in advocating for the interests of City of Kitchener. At the end of the day, this is going to be the driving document that's going to formulate growth in our region, not just the City of Kitchener, but the region. And I think it's important for us in the City of Kitchener to ensure that the taxpayers that we are responsible for, that we, when we have an opportunity to ensure that we can limit that cost for the next 40 to 60 years, so our kids, or perhaps even our kids' kids, this is the time. This is the time that will decide how we want our city to grow up. And that's why it's important, I think, for us to comment at every step. And what I'm hearing from this is that this isn't the only opportunity. This is a little early on. This is us providing some feedback at the early stage of the direction that we would like to see the region. Hopefully they will listen. Hopefully they are listening. And the direction that they go will be in consideration of the comments that are being received by this committee and this council, and some of the comments that I've heard and that I agree with very strongly. And I don't think we've deviated from the importance of this, is the holding the countryside line, the importance of preservation of our farmland in our city, the importance of building within our defined boundaries already, the importance of use of infrastructure that we have built already, that we have paid already, the importance of limiting that future cost of redevelopment of infrastructure, of keeping it within confined boundaries that we can afford. A 63-time multiple is not something that I think we can afford. We are facing that right now, and we're grappling with that issue of how do we meet our infrastructure deficit. Well, guess what? If you continue to build out, and this is where the region needs to hear it, our taxpayers cannot afford it. Our future generations will not be able to afford it. It's not easy to grow up. It's not easy to have intensification, but it's the responsible direction to go, more so not just about the tax and the dollars, but it's because it's environmentally friendly, because it's developing and growing as a community, I think, more responsibly. And these would be my comments, and I hope these are the some of the comments that I've said and my colleagues have said will be inclusive in our feedback to the region. And more so on my later part of from the development community, I just have to say, I understand that they have issues, they have concerns, they don't know which way the direction that the region may be going, and they probably want to see more relaxing of the boundary and more guidelines of them being able to build outward towards the suburban and outside those boundaries. But at the end of the day, they have ample opportunities to provide feedback, not only through the public sessions that we will have, like we did today, and our council, and in the future as well. They will have opportunities to go directly to the region in their public input sessions to continue on advocating. But at the end of the day, we need to be advocating as a committee and as a council for our citizens and our Kitchener residents, and that's what we're doing right now. So I like the suggestion of this being referred, because I think there are a lot of comments that have been made, and I think we need to give our staff opportunity to include those, encompass those in our overall feedback. So with that, Mayor Venvic, did you want to say anything else as you are referring? I thought I'd give you a chance. Or
no, I think staff have heard the broad conversation and input from members of council, as well as the delegations that were here with a variety of viewpoints. this evening. I think, we'll see what comes back that two Mondays from now, divided into those two sections. And hopefully we'll be able to, form some sort of consensus around that position so that we do take one. But part of that message, needs to include, the fact that we're basing it based on not having all of the information that's necessary, and expecting the opportunity for meaningful input later on, and not to just basically say you had your chance and that was it.
I agree. Excellent. So with that, hopefully staff are clear in that direction of the referral. I will take the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries, and I was in support of the referral as well. Okay, so now we're going into the public session of the hearing. So that's 7 o'clock onward. The advertised start time, we're well into that. I think we could probably use a 5-minute break. So why don't we reconvene in about 5 minutes? So it's 8:28, so 8:35, and then we can go on to item number 4. So thank you. Okay, if the committee can begin to come back, if you can just turn your camera on, then you, just so I know that who's back. Okay, that seems to be everyone. So we will reconvene the meeting. Well, welcome back, everyone. So this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act if a person or public body that would otherwise have an ability to appeal a decision of the City of Kitchener to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. And with that, Eric Schneider is our planner that will make a 5-minute presentation. And then we have a delegation as well. And this is for item number 4, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 120 Bullock Street. Eric, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and members of Council. My name is Eric Schneider, and I'm a planner at the City. I'm here tonight to make a recommendation for approval of a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment to facilitate an industrial redevelopment proposal and a major employment opportunity. As we move to the next slide, I will point out that the subject property is located on the corner of Bleems Road and Homer Watson Boulevard. It is within the recently draft approved and registered Homer Watson Business Park. On the next slide, I'll go over a bit of background on the site. The subject property is a portion of the former Budd Automotive lands that operated an automotive manufacturing plant starting in the late 1960s until its closure in 2008. In 2010, it was identified as a prime industrial land by the city as part of our comprehensive review of employment lands. The previous owner rezoned and redesignated the property as commercial as part of an OMB decision in 2013. The lands have been vacant since 2008. As we move to the next slide, I will speak briefly about the current opportunity before us tonight. The applicant is proposing to revert the lands back to industrial in order to build out a large-scale industrial development comprising of light general industrial uses such as manufacturing and warehousing. Approval of these applications will implement the findings of the comprehensive industrial land study that identified the parcel as prime industrial. It will create a gateway to the rest of the Homer Watson Business Park currently under development, and it will provide employment opportunities in this area. On the next slide, there's a concept drawing illustrating the proposed one-story industrial building that would be developed. It would provide approximately 47,000 square meters of industrial space, which is about 500,000 square feet. The applicant has submitted a site plan application to the city that is currently under review. Moving now to the next slide, I will summarize that staff is recommending approval of the applications that would permit a range of light industrial uses and establish parking rates for the development. The proposed application represents good planning principles and are consistent with provincial, regional, and the city's planning policies. The next slide contains the proposed zoning map, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
So there is one delegation. So if the committee can hold questions of staff after the delegation. Heather Price from GSP Group. Heather, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Singh, Mayor Verbanovic, and committee members. Can you hear me okay? Excellent, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening on behalf of the owner, Perimeter Development, with respect to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for 120 Bullock at the corner of Bleems Road and Homer Watson Boulevard. The main purpose of this application, of these two applications, is to revert the designation and zoning that were put in place by the previous owner through an OMB settlement back to the city's recommended designation and zoning to permit industrial employment. The current planning framework applicable to the site is commercial, which only permits a limited range of industrial uses such as warehousing, but it does not permit the full range of employment uses typically found in an industrial park, such as manufacturing. The subject applications would bring the permitted range of land uses more into conformity with the intended range of land uses within the Homer Watson Business Park and facilitate the planned redevelopment of the site for a 47,000 square meter industrial facility. We have reviewed the staff report and are in support of the recommendations. I will be available to answer any questions that you may have related to the applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, that's great. I don't see any questions from the committee. Any questions of staff for clarification? I'll just, Councillor Gazzola, go ahead.
I don't have any questions of staff. I'd like to take the opportunity to move the recommendation. I can just say just a couple of words. It's actually a what I consider a win for our community. It's reverting the zoning back to what it was, and there's been quite a process with this property, and out of the whole thing that's gone on over a 20-year period, it was once considered for industrial land, and the council of the day did go along with a change, and out of the change, the community ended up with a tremendous park, a Bud Park, that is now is totally under our ownership, which was as a result of the transactions that went on. So, and now we're back to changing the zoning to what was probably the preferable zoning all along. So I'm totally in favor of staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. I think you summarized it well. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us as a community for this to be reverted back for manufacturing use as opposed to retail. Again, it allows opportunity for, I think, increased job opportunities on these lands. And as Councillor Gazzola has said, through the process of it all, the community benefited by coming into ownership of the Budfield lands, and that's a huge and considerable asset, not just now, but in the coming years as well. So I think we've done well here as a community, and we have a great partner with Perimeter Development who wants to see manufacturing on this land, and I'm assuming the manufacturing will be more so catered towards advanced manufacturing. It's exactly the direction that we want our manufacturing sector to be maturing towards. And so it's definitely been a win-win, and hopefully a win-win for all parties involved. So with that, I'll call the question. Although moved by Councillor Gazzola, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's unanimous, and I'm in support as well. All right, so we'll go on to item number 5, which is the sign variance application for 105 King Street East, Crown Plaza Hotel, Vista Water Limited Partnership. Before we begin, I would note that a written submission on this matter has been received from Sean Nielsen, Sandra Parks, and Melissa Bowman. Andrew Pennell, who's our senior planner, will provide a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation before we begin. Andrew, whenever you're ready, you have your 5 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Singh. I'm here this evening to discuss a sign variance for 105 King Street East. Next slide, please. Subject property is located at the southwest corner of Benton Street and King Street East. Market Square is located directly across King Street from this property. And the property that we're discussing tonight is occupied presently by the Crown Plaza Hotel. Next slide, please. The applicant submitted the subject sign variance application in late 2019. In response, planning staff conducted the digital downtown sign study in 2020 and 2021, in part because of the implications of the subject application. The sign study report was considered by this committee in June of 2021. And the study found that in general, the downtown community does not support digital signs within the retail core. In addition, planning staff are not supportive of digital signs in the retail core. In May of 2021, the applicant submitted a revised sign variance application to allow a 6.1 meter by 3.05 meter, which is 10 feet by 20 feet, digital sign on the Benton Street facade of the Crown Plaza Hotel. This is approximately 200 square feet. For comparison, the sign would be the same size as the digital billboard signs on Victoria Street heading eastbound towards Guelph, just before you get to the Grand River Bridge. The proposed sign would encroach slightly into the region's Benton Street right-of-way, requiring an encroachment agreement, and the sign would include third-party advertising. In Kitchener, the city's sign bylaw permits digital signs in several areas of the city, subject to regulations. However, digital signs are not permitted in the retail core of downtown. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is a concept image that I prepared. It shows the proposed digital sign superimposed on a photo of the Crown Plaza. This concept image is to scale, so you get an idea of the size, scale, and location of the proposed sign. Next slide, please. For context, I've provided some examples of similar signs. The first example on the left-hand side is a Milton example. This is a large commercial plaza at the intersection of Main Street and Thompson Road. It's the exact same dimensions as the proposed sign, 10 by 20 feet. In this case, the sign is posted, it's mounted on a post rather than mounted on the fascia of a building. So it is slightly different in that regard. And on the right-hand side, there's an example from Kitchener. This is the Victoria Street example that I mentioned just a moment ago. Again, these are the exact same dimensions as the proposed sign, and this is obviously mounted to a post rather than a building fascia as well. For context, it's hard to tell the size of it. If you look to the left-hand side of the digital billboard, you'll see a hydro pole. So you can see it's roughly half the height of that pole. And that gives you some context. Next slide, please. So planning staff has several concerns with the proposed variance. We are concerned about the negative impacts, especially the precedent setting that might occur, that it might allow for the proliferation of digital signs throughout the retail core. We're also concerned about the third-party advertising, that it may have negative impacts on other downtown businesses. And I should remind the committee that in general, the city cannot regulate sign content. Staff are also concerned about a negative impact on the downtown character. The massive size of the proposed billboard digital sign, it's a billboard size. In addition, this sign is at a prominent location within the heart of downtown at a major intersection. There's a lack of setback to the public realm. Again, this sign would actually encroach into the public realm, requiring an encroachment agreement. And there's a concern about light pollution and the city's current inability to regulate lighting levels of digital signs. So planning staff has taken some time to consider comments from the neighborhood and all of the impacts, and accordingly is recommending refusal of the application. I am here for your questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. We have questions, but again, if we can hold our questions of staff till after the delegations. There are 2 delegations I'll try to take the order. It's Councillor March, Urbanovic, and Councillor Schneider, but we'll go to the delegations first. And first up is Amin Bishram from Vista Waterloo Partnership Limited. Amin, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair Singh and Mayor Urbanovic, distinguished councillors. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I've heard what staff has had to say, but one very critical point that staff has not mentioned is that we already have a variance. That variance was issued by the Committee of Adjustments back in November of 2010, November 23rd. That variance allowed us to project from across the street on this particular wall. And that variance allowed us to project as big as we wanted. It was also considered at the time that the applicant was requesting relief from section 680.3.29 of the sign bylaw to locate automatic changing copy sign approximately 140 meters from a residential zone of approximately 5 meters from the intersection. Towards the third page of that particular variance, it was very clearly written, as well as to ensure projected sign image does not interfere with the traffic signal at the intersection, staff will be imposing a condition to ensure that the image is projected at a height greater than the height of the traffic signal. The conclusion was, based on the above, planning staff recommends that the application be approved subject to the conditions noted. The condition only being that it be projected above the street level and that it be a projector. Now, 2010 to today, a lot has changed. That particular report is application number SG 2010-026. Councillors, all we are trying to achieve in our particular request is that today the world has changed over the last 11 years. You know, Christie Digital is a Kitchener-Waterloo company. The illumination of these particular digital boards can be adjusted any way we want. We are not in a residential zone. As we all know, from 2013 to 2018, all us hospitality people as well as restaurants were significantly impacted by the light rail transit, the construction of it. Right after that came along COVID. Now, hospitality, the tourism sector, as well as the restaurants have been significantly affected. And a lot of money has been spent to renovate these properties. In our case, $14 million. In other restaurants downtown, I am sure hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. What we are trying to achieve is to create a facility where everybody can utilize that facility. Now, having said that, there are three particular things that we were looking for. One is to advertise the internal aspects of our hotel, the Crown Plaza. That means the restaurants, the banquets, the rooms, the health club, the facilities. Now, why are we doing it now and not 5 years ago? The reason we're doing it today, and we have requested this board be put up almost since 2016, but as staff has mentioned, we filed this application only in 2019 because really we weren't making much headway. Why are we doing that? Because we're seeing that in the KW region, there is a tremendous growth in immigration. That immigration growth contains of a lot of different ethnicities, to a lot of different people within the core of the downtown. We used to own the Valhalla Inn in 1994, converted that to the Sheraton Four Points and sold it in 1998. In 2012, we bought that hotel back and converted it to the Crown Plaza. So I have been a veteran of the downtown core since 1994. I have seen growth within the core, significant growth. And what is happening is that we want to capitalize from our hotel's perspective, number one, from that growth for the banquets, which will create value not just for us, but will create value for all other hotels, all other convention centers, because in order to do certain types of weddings, as an example, Portuguese weddings or Indian weddings, today a lot of these types of weddings are taking place only in Toronto. It will bring business within the core, tax dollars within the core, that will create value for other offspring businesses, such as banquet facilities, such as other hotels, such as the Walper, such as the Delta at Waterloo, or the downtown Kitchener hotels. So that is one area of why we want the digital board. The second area we have suggested in our presentation, which somehow staff did not mention, is that we are prepared to give free time to the city, whether it be the BIA, whether it be the city, and whether it be for any functions, any advertising that the city wants, whether it be multicultural functions, whether it be Oktoberfest, whether it be advertising just for COVID, what precautions to take, etc. That is free, that is gratis. The only cost we were asking be covered is the cost of graphics. Number three, hospitality today is a very much damaged area of business. We have a lot of restaurants on the King Street side. A lot of them have spent, at least the BIA has spent, thousands and thousands of dollars putting patios out there. But yet, when you ask somebody who drove by downtown, didn't pay attention to it, we want to advertise for those people if they want. And we are also prepared to say to them, gratis for 1 year, there is a cost associated for those people, and it'll be primarily for the purposes of presenting the graphics for the ad to run. We are not talking about third party insofar as the outside of the downtown core is concerned. We're not talking about McDonald's or Pepsi, or whether it be Louis Vuitton, or whether it be other types of third party brands. I am talking purely of the downtown core between Duke Street and Charles Street, and where it ends before Victoria Street and towards EB. That's the core I'm talking about, because these people could use the help today. It appears that staff has basically written us up like we're out to do third parties and we're going to make a lot of money out of it. The board is going to cost $75,000, 50 to 75. The board is going to be run by a third party. That third party does charge to do the graphics, not the time on the board, but the graphics. So if the city wants to run a multicultural ad, I don't do the ad. This company will do the ad, and they would have to post it on that. So the cost of the graphics alone is what now that runs today anywhere from $150 to $300 per ad, just to run the cost of the graphics for it to be advertised properly. Same thing that it would be for any other ad. Now, if La Cucina wants to advertise for a month, 2 months, the time on the board's free. It's the graphics that's going to cost. So we're not in the business of making money on this board. We're in the business of just running ads that will benefit us, benefit the city, the BIA, for all events downtown, whether it is Ribfest, multiculturalism, whatever we got, Oktoberfest. And that's gratis completely. And also for a year, I'm committing to anybody downtown who wants to run any ads, just pay for the graphics. Will there be a little cost associated with utilities? Yes. But is that going to be a significant cost? No. And if council feels that I need to waive that too, in terms of that cost, we're prepared to do that. It's, councilors, in summary, what I'd like to add is I also owned a casino in Reno, Nevada, which was the Flamingo Hilton. I'm a gaming licensee in the state of Nevada. I went there from 2001 to 2008. These boards don't harm anyone. These boards do not create, fights, or do not create ugliness if they're done with style. Today we've got Christie Digital in the city of downtown Kitchener. I can promise you the designs that they have is a wow. We're a technological hub. We can afford to have technology displayed in our core. Secondly, we have a board that we've put up in Sudbury in the downtown core, right at the center of Elm Street and Notre Dame, where there are 40,000 cars and there's residential across the street. In 15 years, how many complaints have we had? Zero. And that's a moving digital board. So when people talk about illumination and they talk about, oh my God, you're going to create a Las Vegas, or you're going to create a Dundas in Yonge Street, that's not our intent. Our intent is so that when people drive by, they know what's going on. And finally, it is my understanding, and in our building at the bottom, we've got the LRT office. You know how many times people have come to our front desk to ask us where the LRT office is? This board would be right above the LRT office. In the future, it is my understanding that the city may want to do a walking King Street. Are we not here to encourage people to take the LRT? Would it not be nice to put it on the board and say LRT office here, the train station right on Charles Street or right in front, promoting LRT, etc.? The intent is not to create, please, not to create a billboard that's confusing everybody. It's one board, it's replacing the current sign that's there, and it is just in exchange for what has already been approved, which is this bylaw, SG 2010-026. So there were two people. Now, when the city decided that they were going to do a study, it's started in November of this past year. The study was this: 70 people from November to March were solicited or by email, of which 33 said no. And if you look at the results, there were 10 no in a row, yeses, 23 said yes, 11 abstained. Now that's from November to March. Two people objected. One is a Mr. Nugent, who owns a Matter of Taste, and the other is obviously Mr. Perimeter Institute. I believe the gentleman's name is Craig Beatty. Obviously, he owns the Walper. Why would he want me to have a digital board? There's a self-serving issue there. Other than that, the BIA did not provide a written commitment that they objected. If anything, staff went to the BIA and asked them for a discussion. The same thing with the Downtown Association. So,
I mean, I've given you a lot of latitude to have you say simply you've been a long time investor in the downtown core, and of course you're passionate about this, and that's why I gave you the extra time. But I think we've heard obviously your concerns that you've laid out. So with that, any questions from the committee? Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mr. Bisram, for your presentation. I want to know if you can just clarify your point about you have three goals. One is to advertise your internal amenities. Two is to give free time for the city and or BIA other than the cost of graphics. But the third one is unclear and to me, because I didn't catch it.
the third one was all the restaurants within the boundary of the downtown core, or anybody within the boundary of the downtown core, if they needed any assistance in advertising, whether it's the restaurants that are on King Street or anyone else that needed anything.
Yeah.
For the first year or so, we would just simply charge them whatever the graphics are. They can pay directly to the artist who's making the graphics.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
And then after that first year, or let's say you didn't have a lot of uptake, are you saying that you're not planning to have your third party who's operating it, like you have a contract, I guess, with a company, that if they got a really big deal with a larger company, like you said, McDonald's or Pepsi, etc., you're saying that you would absolutely have a policy of refusing it?
Absolutely, yes.
That's the first I'm hearing of that. And
no. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so we don't regulate content as much as we regulate just, like this is a sign bylaw. It's not about which advertising is yes or no. And so it's hard to understand how you or any potential future manager or owner might be able to make good on that type of, concern that we've heard from the community. Can you help me understand?
Absolutely. Look, the intent is not for us to be Pattison. We're not a Pattison digital board sign company that's out there marketing third parties. The intent for us is to create value for the downtown core. Now, as a condition of approval, and perhaps withdrawing my approval if I do anything of that nature, I am totally amenable. I am not in the business, as I mentioned, of doing that, because the whole idea was that if I wanted to do that, I could basically say to Patterson, you put a board outside of the city, I will advertise on that board.
Yeah, it's still a little unclear to me how that'll work, but anyway, thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure. No, and then you can put it as a condition on the approval. And all I'm asking is that the approval's in place, that it be exchanged for a digital board versus a projector from across the street. And if a condition is that no third party outside of the core of the downtown retail area, I am perfectly fine. And if you want to extend it to the city of Kitchener, I'm fine. But I am perfectly fine with that, that it would not be for companies that are national companies, etc.
Sorry, yeah, one more question. So what about the concern around the lights? You know, we have really, as you mentioned, these attractive, beautiful patios that the BIA has invested in, and the downtown is looking great. And there are some who and I know you'll disagree, but there are some who will say that those big signs would detract from that urban visual experience. So what can you tell me about your ability to control the lighting?
The lumens, what they call the lumens of these lights, can be controlled automatically through timers. So as an example, after 11 at night, it can be completely brought down. It's very common. We have that in Sudbury. We have that in other places. And it was very common in certain areas, but today's technology allows for that. And in our case specifically, Councillor Marsh, we don't have any residential units around us because we are right at the intersection of King and Benton. But these lumens, this conversation can certainly be adjusted in terms of, or at least this type of illumination can certainly be adjusted in terms of the what they call the timers. At 11 p.m. at night, it can go right down. It can start again. It's in the winter time, maybe at 6 p.m. And it will light up, and by 9, 10 o'clock, and depends if it's a slow time, it can go down even at 10 o'clock. We can even turn it off. It doesn't matter. You can turn the whole thing off at a particular time, and which we don't have a problem with. We're not going to keep this digital board on 24/7. That's not the intent. The intent is to have it come on certain times and go off at certain times, with the understanding that it has to also be beneficial to everybody around us.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Mayor Bevanovic.
Thanks, Chair Singh. Mr. Visram, thanks for coming in this evening. The one question I have is you've been focusing a lot on third-party signs, but the reality is we look at other changing copy signs in the city. In other words, other digital signs that exist outside of the downtown. They're not permitted to advertise anything other than their own business. And so my question is this application contingent on you being able to advertise more than the Crowne Plaza? In other words, if nothing else were able to be advertised on it, is that an investment you would look to make just for the sake of your hotel, or you would abandon it at that point?
In the alternative, I would, Mayor Bevanovic, I would consider just keeping it for our hotel.
Okay, thank you.
My preference is to, I would still, even if it's for my hotel, I would still consider gratis to donate time to the BIA or the city without a doubt. The question is, I didn't want to come across unfair to the people in the downtown core, because one of the arguments was, by email was, what about other people? Because other people may, want to have digital boards. Nobody's going to spend $75,000 on a business that does $300,000 in revenue or $500,000. And so I was trying to make it all inclusive. If anybody wants it, it's available.
Yeah, I think the point of my question, admittedly, is, you do make a point around the fact that you do have an existing sign variance for a projection situation, but we don't permit digital signs with third-party advertising elsewhere in the city. And so, that would really open up a whole new area if council were to go in that direction.
But Mayor, and I respect that, and I totally thank you for making that comment. However, if you were to look at the exception that I already have, which I cited earlier, SG 2010-026, it allows me for third-party advertising. It was approved and it was signed at that. Now I have the unsigned copy, but I know there's a signed copy by a Brian Page, Lisa Thompson, and a Julian Vaughn Westerholt. And it says clearly that we are allowed to market to third party.
And so I think it would be helpful later. A committee will have opportunity to ask clarification of staff, and so we can get clarity on the approval that you already have that's from in the past. So, anything else, Mayor Benedict?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gazzola.
Yeah, my question dealt with the approval that's already in place. I don't know, is that something I should be asking of staff or of the delegate?
No, I think it'd be helpful of staff if you have any specifics based on the delegation that Amin has made, the points that he made. That would be that'd be more appropriate.
Well, okay. You talked about this approval that you had, that you were given, and in your opinion, do you still, is that approval still in existence? Is it still?
Yes. That question's for me, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, Councilor Gazzola, it is. And I will read the language that says, the location of the proposed automatic changing copy sign being directly across the street from Speaker's Corner lends itself to supporting a sign with non-accessory brackets third-party content. As this is community space and a well-traveled intersection, the non-accessory parenthesis third-party content is considered appropriate and desirable. Based on the above, planning staff recommends that the application be approved subject to the conditions noted below. Conditions are: the applicant shall obtain a sign permit, pay $1,200. Number 2, the automatic changing copy sign only projected on the westerly facade of the Delta Hotel at 11 Benton Street location shown on the Committee of Adjustments report.
I think in clarity, just a summary that you feel that you already have that approval. I think that is sufficient in your response to Councilor Gazzola's question. We can ask clarity on what approvals you have of staff at a later time. I don't think it serves anything more by reading out what's your assumption on the approval. So
yes,
I appreciate that in your assumption that you have the approval already. Councilor Gazzola?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Pinal, we'll probably come back for clarity to you for questions soon anyways. There are no other questions of the delegation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move on to Kevin Muir with GSP Group, Inc. Kevin?
Good evening.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Kevin Muir with GSP Group. We are the agent for the applicant for Amin.
Kevin, as you begin, I'm going to be a little bit more tight on the time for 5 minutes. I gave ample time for Amin already, so I think we've had quite a bit of clarity. But please be succinct in your comments.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to replicate any of the means points. It's more just the planning side, the technical side. We were back in June. We were a delegate to the committee in terms of the sign study. Had some discussion there. A couple points I would say from the planning side. The first, I would say I would echo some of the comments that Amin made in terms of sort of the jump from some of the findings of the public engagement. There were a lot of split opinions, I think, as you go through the hard data. There was a mix of opinions, and to go from that to essentially to sort of an indication in the staff report of a community preference for no signs, digital signs, is a little bit of a leap for us. I do appreciate, from a planning perspective, I do appreciate fully the desire to not have digital signs that expand everywhere throughout the retail core indiscriminately. I get that fully. The hope was when the original application back in 2019 was pulled back and withdrawn, the hope was the study would actually look into some of the more technical analysis bits in terms of actual impacts and potential assessed options for strategic locations for signs. I think it was in the recommendation that staff could look at that, but they did not as part of the studies. So unfortunately, instead, we have to do it on a site-specific basis. There's a lot of comments, I would say, in the staff report of this being precedent setting. And I think this is really a unique situation, a unique site that doesn't lend very well to precedence and precedent setting. This is a very strategic location, I would say, within the core area, prominent major cross street, Frederick and Benton, Ion route, and really this is, a main regional road interface with King Street. You have to go all the way up to Victoria to see this again. You have to go all the way down past the downtown to Ottawa to see this again. So it's a very specific location. It's a very strategic use, one of 2 hotels within the core area. So this is not your normal mom and pop retail shop. It is very specific in that regard. It's a distinct site. It's a very large corner site, has multiple frontages, and it allows the opportunity to put the digital sign on the side street, not on the King Street frontage, which is very important. It's a non-heritage property, so no impacts there. It's a replacement of a large sign of an equal size, albeit a static sign. And lastly, obviously the previous approvals, that Amin had mentioned. In terms of the impacts, I think there was, like from our perspective, there was 4 that we saw within the staff report. One is traffic, obviously traffic potential impacts. The big thing from the staff report is transportation staff specifically have no concerns with the location. They had some questions about the lighting, but in terms of the location, there was no concerns there. From a lighting perspective, as Amin indicated, the proponent is very willing to work with staff. Other municipalities do regulate lighting levels. If you look at similar mid-size, you can look at Hamilton's, you can look at the Londons. There are specifics in terms of lighting level requirements. There are also requirements for shut-off times. So there's a period where they can be lit. The real bonus, obviously, with digital signs is the programmable nature of it in terms of, ambient lighting sensors and monitoring of light levels, things like that. So they're very adaptable. The third sort of series of impacts, that's streetscape public realm side. It was unfortunate we had provided a sort of a detailed package with our application of, other examples in North America and Europe, large digital signs within great public places, and just demonstrating the fact they can coexist. If you look at some of the digital signs along Weber Street, I don't think there's a detriment to the streetscape or the urban environment, especially the one at Galleria. You can almost barely notice it's there.
Kevin, if you can start summarizing, please.
Yeah, and then the third-party advertising, I think, as Amin indicated, the proponent is very willing to work with staff to sort of flesh that out in terms of, agreements, in terms of what's on the sign, how long they're on the sign, the percentage of, third-party versus first-party, things like that. So that's pretty much our delegation, and certainly willing to take any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll see if there's any questions. I don't see any hands up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll open up the committee to ask questions of staff.
Chair Singh, I think you have one other delegation.
Yeah, it's under Amin, so it wasn't noticed separately. I thought that was a joint delegation between Kevin and Samir Ghazi. It's not noted as a separate delegation on my chair notes. Again, I did give, because it was a joint, there were 2 on it. That's why I gave Amin extra time, and he had almost close to 10 minutes. So Samir, if there's anything poignant that you want to add very quickly, you're welcome to do so. But again, I think ample time has been given to, make the points that you guys have wanted to make. So if there's anything new, please just stick to that and be very succinct.
Thank you so much, Councillor Singh. I just wanted to add that the LRT, the train passes by this location every 5 to 10 minutes. And imagine how many people are sitting in that train. If we advertise the downtown businesses, those people, they live outside the core, they will come back in the evening with their family and they will spend more time in the core. That's all what I have to add. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's helpful. So again, committee for questions of staff, Councillor Marsh.
Thanks very much, Chair Singh. So a few questions for Mr. Pinnell. I'm wondering about a couple comments you made. You said that we cannot regulate sign content. So if we wanted to say that if there were a sign allowed, that it may not have any advertising on it at all, other than for the owner of the sign, is that something that we would even be allowed to do?
Through you, Chair Singh. I've looked into this with our legal services department, and we are unable to regulate sign content. We can't do agreements as a condition of the variance. If Samir or Amin wanted to provide a letter, you could take them at their word, but we aren't able to enter into any agreements or put conditions on this variance with respect to content.
And then you said something also regarding the inability for us to regulate illumination or light levels. Can you expand on that?
There is, through you, Mr. Chair, there is some language in the sign bylaw with respect to lighting levels. It does talk about hours of operation. It does get into a little bit lumens and lighting levels. At present, our bylaw enforcement staff do not have the technology or the people power to monitor these types of things. So it's an issue that we don't have the ability to regulate ambient levels of digital signs.
Yeah, and then so the proponents for this sign are saying, well, there aren't any residential units directly facing it, and that's true. Have you had a look at the sightlines from the new DTK condo developments? You know, the 39-story building. Wouldn't some of the units from bedrooms be able to see the sign? Wouldn't they have a direct line of sight to that sign? Oh, you're muted.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, they would have a view. It's not a direct view.
Right.
But it would be from an angle. The DTK condos would certainly have a view to that sign. And we don't know what future condo or rental residential buildings are going to be constructed along that stretch of King Street in the future.
Or Benton, for that matter, or any street.
Or Benton.
Near, yeah. Okay. All right. And then when we have a decision made by council or a committee of council, like the Committee of Adjustment, if the action is not taken, is there any time frame after which a decision is no longer valid, or is it in perpetuity until a new decision is made?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there is not a condition on the variance with a time lapse, then the variance remains in perpetuity. I can say in the case of the video projection sign that Amin was referring to, that sign would still be in effect, technically speaking.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I will move staff's recommendation, and I will have comments too.
Next up is Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, you've sort of answered my first part of the question. as to whether that original projection rule that had been given is still in place. Can you tell me from what the size of that projection would be in comparison to the size that they're looking for the current digital sign?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I reviewed the variance report from 2010, and there was no size given for the video projection. So we know that the proposed sign in this particular instance is 10 feet by 20 feet, 200 square feet total, but there is no limits given on the projection for the video projection sign.
Does that mean that it could be any size?
Yes, there's no limit that I saw in the report. That it may have been an oversight at the time. I don't know how many video projection signs we had in 2010, but it's certainly something that we're considering at this point in time.
Yeah. Thank you for that. The other concern you have, rightfully so, is that you don't want to see these signs all over the place. Do we have any way of saying that of limiting the number of these signs, or if you approve this, is it then wide open for further approvals in other locations in that downtown area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe the issue becomes that if one sign is approved, that's a sign from council that signs are okay. And we, as a municipality, we strive to be fair and equitable. And so the issue is, if there was another sign variance that came in, it would likely go to council just as it is again. However, if we've said yes to one, I mean, it's up to council's discretion, but the concern would be to be fair and equitable. There might be an inclination to need to approve a second or third or fourth.
Okay, so you're basically telling me that legally there's no restrictions on that, but council's practice in the past has been when they go in a certain direction, they continue in that direction. Is that what you've just said, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next is Mayor Bevenovic.
Sorry, I hit that, but it didn't open up. Thanks, Chair Singh, and thanks, Mr. Pannell, for your report. Just want to follow up on some of the questions and your responses to Councillor Marsh. First, on the issue of third-party advertising, because if I understood your response to Councillor Marsh was that we don't have a way to regulate it, and yet my understanding is that all of the digital signs and so on that we have on buildings, whether it's on City of Kitchener buildings, on churches, on the Europro building and so on, all of those signs are limited to advertising their own activities and events in their building, and can't do any third-party advertising. Is that correct? So I'm just not clear on your response versus that, if my understanding is correct.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So third-party advertising is generally not permitted throughout the city. In this particular instance, the applicant is requesting a specific variance to permit third-party advertising. So that would allow advertising of the hotel and restaurant within the building, but also any other business, good or service that the applicant wants to provide. And the city is able to regulate many aspects of signs, like the size and the location, but not the content. In general, the city can't regulate the content of the advertising.
Right, but to be clear then, if the variant that was approved tonight restricted third-party advertising to make it consistent with all the other signs that already exist in the city, that we can regulate that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and in fact, would that not be a step back from what they currently can do? In fact, because right now they can do third-party advertising if they were inclined to project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the video projection sign approval inherently permits third-party advertising. And so, yes, it would be a step back in that regard. Video projection signs are different than digital signs in many ways. The lighting levels typically are much higher with a digital sign, and they're always visible day and night. And video projection signs are much less likely than digital signs to proliferate within the downtown, just because of the specific circumstances that have to be in place for the distance between the projector and the reflective surface, the angle, etc. So that's something to consider as well.
Sure, but just to be, I'm having some very specific questions, and I welcome the additional information. But to be clear, it would actually be a step back in that the third-party advertising, if that's what we approve, would no longer be permitted. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. On the issue of regulating light levels. You've indicated that we don't have the ability to do that, yet I do believe we do deal with lighting levels in developments and so on when we get complaints. And I'm not sure if it's planning staff or other staff that actually go out and measure those and work with the developer to make changes. Certainly that's information that's been provided to myself and other members of council in the past. Today, it sounds like we don't have that ability. So I'm a little confused on that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can assure the committee that planning division does not have the technology or expertise to assess lighting levels or to regulate, or not to regulate, but to monitor them. And neither does the bylaw enforcement division. If that division is available tonight, perhaps they can speak to that question.
I see, Mr. Chair, I see Ms. Oosterveld.
Yeah, Janine, I think is that something you want to say, just to add further to what Andrew has said?
Yeah, just to clarify through the chair. So our bylaw does include particular lighting levels for that type of signage. It's just that it's kind of if we get a complaint, it's a matter of how we go about in responding to the complaint. And what I would say is that because of our challenges and just in terms of monitoring those lighting levels, we would have to either work with the owner and their lighting consultant to confirm and get that certification that it is meeting our objectives, or we might need to seek outside advice. But we can regulate, or we can enforce our bylaw. It's just a matter of the tools that we use to enforce it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The last question, just in terms of comparison, I know the largest sort of outside of the Pattison signs that you showed in your presentation, the largest digital sign that I can think of in the downtown, but not on the two streets in question where digital signs are permitted, is the one at the Galleria at the corner of Frederick and Weber. Do you know roughly how large that sign is and how that would compare to the one in question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact dimensions. I do know that the actual digital component of that sign is just one component of the sign. I believe there's a much larger non-digital component. I don't have the exact dimensions. I can provide those to the committee at a later date if it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I would venture to guess that it's at least 8 by 15, if not bigger, since I drive by it on a daily basis. And just from a proximity point of view, that would be much closer from a line of sight. From example, from the DTK condos, it would only be a block away versus this. Well, actually, it'd be about the same comparison, one corner to the next. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I just wondered if, Mr. Pennell, if you had any information about the video signs. So once the Crown Royal, or what are they called, the Crown Plaza hotel got permission to do the video signage on the wall, did you get any other requests from other downtown businesses to do the same?
I'm not sure if Janine can speak to that. I don't have as much history as she might.
So through the chair, we received the formal application for this digital sign. I'm thinking it was June, if I'm not mistaken, of this year, the formal application. And since that time, we have not received another application for a digital sign in downtown.
No, but I'm referring to the video sign that they had.
The video projection sign.
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
And have you received any complaints about it?
They never proceeded with it.
Oh, so they've got permission to do it, but it's never been illuminated. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Sort of building on what the mayor was asking about putting a condition in about third-party advertising. Could we also put a condition in that would set the time frame for operation? I know with some signs, they're off at 11 p.m. till 6 a.m. Could we put a brightness condition in on the variance that, you know, we could, Amin seemed to be very amenable to being very cooperative and you know, responding and not wanting to light up the city at you know, 10 o'clock at night. So is there something that we could work in condition wise into this variance?
Through you, Chair Singh, yes, conditions for brightness and hours can be inserted into the approval. However, again, regulating the light levels is another matter altogether in my conversations with bylaw enforcement.
I understand there's not like a measurement like you can do a measure the dBs, but it appears to me that you know, the Vista Group would be you know, we can, you know, test it out one night and say, okay, yeah, we want it down at this level. Okay, so it's at 70% starting at 9 p.m. So I think, you know, that's something worth considering, putting conditions in on that. Thanks.
Thank you. That appears all the questions from the committee to staff. I just have a quick clarifying one. When staff determined, you know, either encouraging support or refusal of the application, did we consider perhaps doing a pilot project with Vista Group of being, you know, kind of a test case, 2-year window or whatever? And that way, again, we could put some parameters on, you know, the how bright the sign is, and seeing how well it's being regulated or not. And we can see the number of complaints we're receiving and our capacity to enforce. Is that an avenue? Perhaps would staff reconsider and be okay with an approval subject to it's only an interim period as a pilot?
Through you, Chair Singh, I believe that is something that could be done. I'd like to hear from our legal staff on that, if they're available to weigh in as well, but I believe so.
Okay, all right. I didn't ask this question of, before, hearing that staff may be more comfortable knowing that there's a certain, stopgap if this does not go the way we intend, the best of intentions that the Vista Group is putting forward through a pilot. Can I ask if the representations, or you're still around, and seeing would that be a viable option, or is the cost too prohibitive? The fact that you have to invest into the sign, and 2 years in, if it's just not feasible, or the city's decision is not to proceed with it, would you still go forward even with a interim period and be a part of the pilot? Your mic's off. Your mic's off.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Singh. I appreciate it. Appreciate the question. The capital outlay on this sign is quite significant. Now, if you feel that that's the only way, obviously, the question is, does the capital outlay justify the 2 years? That's the issue. It's not something I can just lease from somebody and say, let's try it for 2 years. It's something I have to buy and then amortize over the course of time. So that's my issue here.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too. And that's why I thought I asked, is it just prohibitive? Although it sounds good, but again, it won't be a viable option, knowing that in 2 years that it may come to an end and you don't recover your money back.
But I'm giving you my assurance, whatever the city requirements are, I'm willing totally and unequivocally to work within the parameters of those requirements.
Okay, all right. And that's what we can put, the committee can continue putting its mind to. Councillor Michaud, you didn't have your hand up before. Did you have questions of staff?
I do now, sorry. And if this question was asked earlier, I apologize. There's been a lot of going back and forth here. If this sign is allowed to go in the downtown, does this open the gates for other signs, or is there regulations you can put in? Like if there's one sign, is there a distance between areas of these type of signs, or is it just going to start, is it setting a precedent is what I'm going to ask.
Andrew?
Risk setting a precedent, sorry.
Yes, through the chair. So staff is very concerned about precedent setting. Any application that sign variance application that comes to staff where there's a refusal contemplated would automatically be referred to committee and council for decision. So committee and council have the ability to look at future digital signs. I think the issue becomes if one is permitted in the spirit of being fair and equitable to other property owners and citizens, it becomes potentially problematic with refusals after an approval has been given.
Okay, and was there not a ticker type sign that used to go across King from the Crown Plaza, probably the Valhalla Inn at the time, to Market Square years ago? Is this equivalent to that? Is this a bigger? Maybe Andrew, you don't even know that. I'm dating myself.
So I see Amin's hand up there.
That was Manfred Conrad, who had put the sign on the walkway between it was back then it was the 4 Point Sheraton to the Market Square.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to say, we have 2 city blocks there, so our sign is obviously bigger. If there was ever a precedent,
I'm sorry, you've had so much opportunity to
you.
be able to advocate on your issue. It's just again, I can't allot more time. So you answered the question, so thank you for that. Councillor Michaud, is that it, or do you have any other questions, staff?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Marsh, you have your hand up again. Did you have another question?
Just comment.
Okay. Mayor Vivinovic, comment or question?
I do have one more question, just as a follow-up to Councillor Michaud's question. To be clear, digital signs, like this is they're only not permitted in the two streets in question, essentially, which is King Street and Charles, correct? Or maybe Duke as well. That's it in the downtown core. Everywhere else, digital signs are permitted throughout the city.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So to clarify, the retail core, within the retail core, all digital signs are prohibited. And that extends generally from Victoria Street down to Cedar, and then from Duke to Charles. It does extend a little bit outside of that area as well, but those are the general boundaries. So
Okay.
it is a larger area of the downtown core.
But everywhere else in the city, they're permitted subject to sign regulations.
Correct.
And we're using, the city of Kitchener is using digital signs on a number of our buildings as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Michaud, oh, she signed up. So to comments, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I do, well, I moved the motion. I can wait till the end if you want, or whatever.
If you want to be last, that's okay. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I support staff's recommendation on this one. I think what's unique about the downtown versus other parts of the city is the concentration of businesses all in one corridor. So if you allow for this one, I really do worry that it's going to extend beyond that. I don't think, I mean, I asked earlier about the video projection signs and if there was an interest of other companies, but I think that's also very different. So I do worry about it. I posted something on my social media this week and I had like 100 responses and I would say 5 were maybe in support of this. And see, this is just people from the general public. So I think that, you know, some of the concerns that they had included light pollution and simply advertising. Like we get enough advertising if we've got cable TV, we get advertisements all the time. Every term we see advertisements. So, you know, if we can keep that at a minimum and out of the core, I think that's a good thing. Distractions that are created by these signs, I think is also a legitimate concern. And the competition that it could provoke within the downtown core. So, you know, $75,000 for a sign is a lot of money. And another business downtown might see this as an attractive option, but wouldn't be able to compete in the same way that a bigger corporation can. So I would support staff's recommendation. I think it's not something I want to see in the downtown core. I'm not big on advertising. And so I think there are other ways that people can try to get their messages out there without using digital signs. So.
Schneider.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. I'm, you know, after hearing, I mean, I really feel that he's probably amenable to conditions that would, you know, make this more palatable, like with a condition in about third-party advertising and hours of operation and brightness controls and conditions. So I'm wondering if, you know, a deferral on this might be, you know, something to consider so we can discuss this with Amin and the Vista Group to, you know, take away some of the concerns that have been raised here tonight. Because, you know, we're in a situation where, as the mayor has said, they do have the right now to project onto their building and onto a much bigger area and with third-party advertising. And this digital sign is a much smaller sign. And with respect, and all due respect to Councillor Chapman, the picture that was on your social media was not anywhere near the size of the, you know, the screen that they're talking about. It was way bigger. And, you know, it wasn't a very, you know, accurate description of, you know, what was going on. So I do hear the concerns and I'd like to try and answer them. So, I'd like to consider a deferral for, you know, for the next council meeting, and so we could have discussions with them and maybe get these conditions into the variance.
Okay, so you're moving a deferral to the council meeting, giving time for staff to engage with Vista Group to see what type of conditions could be placed and what would they be amenable for, as well as would you be comfortable with the consideration of a pilot? I know staff aren't comfortable to answer based on the legality of it, and legal may want to weigh in. Would you be comfortable in looking on as a pilot as well?
I do agree that it's quite a lot of money to put out, for a pilot. So I would rather have, the third party advertising condition in there, but to allow for some, but only within the downtown core, because he was clear that he wants to support the downtown core and city and BIA things, and hours of operation. So the sign could be turned off from a certain time frame and with the brightness controls. So
okay. All right.
That can be worked out. Yeah.
So deferral motion takes precedence, so that will be voted on. I'm going to be a bit of a stickler on process. Again, we're going well into the night, so we're not going to be debating other than the deferral at this point. If there's questions regarding timing, please focus on that. Councillor Ioannidis, do you have a question regarding the deferral or the timing?
No, other than I can support the deferral.
Okay. Councillor Michaud, question regarding the deferral or its timing?
No, I won't support the deferral.
Okay. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't spoken on this one. I just wanted a clarification, if I could, again, Mr. Chair, of what we are looking for in terms of the deferral coming back. I understand and again, this worked out between staff and the applicant, but no third-party advertising, brightness controls, and full shut-off. And was that it?
And the times of the digital sign operation, I think all three would be on the table for discussion and seeing what Vista Group is amenable for, what kind of controls.
Okay, and just because I haven't commented, just to give them a heads up, my intention was to support staff's recommendation at this time. So I will support the deferral though. I just wanted to be clear then that in terms of that brightness, that's my overriding concern. I want a sign that is effectively barely visible in the evening and not causing harm to the local community when that comes back. Thanks.
Okay, all right. I don't see, Councillor Michaud, you still have your hands up. And Councillor Marsh, question regarding the deferral or its timing.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, are you saying that after we vote on the deferral, if it fails, that only then will you take comments about the general motion?
That's correct, yes.
I will not support the deferral.
Okay. All right, I will take the vote on the deferral first.
A recorded vote, please.
Okay. Recorded vote has been called, so I'll start with Ward 1. Councillor Davey?
In favor.
Councillor Schneider?
In favor, sorry.
Councillor Gazzola?
In favor.
Councillor Michaud?
Opposed.
Councillor Galloway Sealock?
Opposed.
Next is myself. I'm in favor. Councillor Ioannidis?
In favor.
And then Councillor Johnston?
I'm opposed.
Okay, and Councillor Chapman?
Opposed.
And Councillor Marsh?
Opposed.
And Mayor Verbenovic?
In favor.
Okay, so I believe that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 6-5. So that passes, I believe. Okay, all right, so the motion has been deferred to council, giving opportunity just as a direction to staff to work with Vista Group in seeing if there are specific controls regarding the illumination, the timing, and third-party advertising. And that would be brought back to council, and the original recommendation will be voted during council based on any changes. All right, and that.
Well, sorry. We just voted on a deferral. We didn't vote on an amendment. So I just want to be clear about that, you know.
So no, it's not an amendment, Councillor Marsh. It's given time to staff to work with Vista Group and seeing what controls they're willing to compromise on. It's not to say that committee has given direction to accept whichever controls they're willing. It's just those are on the table, and that will be factored in as our final decision on the overall motion, which staff recommendation is a refusal. But if they are willingness to compromise, that's something that we could take into consideration, and during council either decline their application or approve based on the conditions that they're willing to agree to. Is that clear?
I don't think it's clear yet on what will be, how we'll be voting in what order, but that's fine. We can figure that out later. Thanks.
Okay. Would staff comment, or just for clarity? I want to make sure. So I don't want to unreasonably rush if you're not clear, Councillor Marsh. Do staff have a clear direction based on the deferral? Committee isn't just deferring to make a decision on council day. I think through the deferral motion, there is a direction and sense for staff to communicate with Vista Group and seeing what conditions would they be willing to impose on themselves based on, again, the illumination, the timing, as well as the third-party advertising. Staff? Oh, yep, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, the only question that I had is about the third-party advertising. I believe Councillor Schneider made a comment about prohibiting third-party advertising. So that would not be done through a condition. That would be done through an omission of the one of the three variances that's being requested. And I think Councillor Schneider made a comment about allowing third-party for some businesses for the year-long period, but not others. And so I was a little bit confused about that.
Sorry, that was specific to the delegation's comments about supporting downtown core businesses. So the third-party advertising would be limited to the businesses in the downtown core that he described geographically, the BIA, and also allowing for the city to promote events.
Thank you.
I think the committee is giving a broad direction for staff to communicate. I don't think we're giving any specifics of what we're willing to compromise on. That's the deferral. That's something that what we would decide on council meeting. Okay. Are you okay with that, Councillor Marsh? Is that a little more clear?
Yep. I still think that we need to vote on the original motion.
Councillor Marsh, if you vote on the original motion, then if it gets defeated, then what is the purpose of the deferral? Deferral takes precedence, so that means that we are deferring the final decision on that original motion to council.
I don't mean today. I mean, never mind.
Oh, yes. That would be my understanding, that we would take a vote on the original motion come council day as well. That would be my understanding as well. Mayor Vivanovic?
Yeah, just further to your point on the issue of the third party, I think staff probably would be, it would serve council well for staff to have wording for two scenarios. One being that would allow some limited third party, as in relation to the downtown, as Councillor Schneider has suggested, or some wording that would be more consistent with other digital signs throughout the city, which doesn't allow any third party. Because I think, so that we're not having to send it back again 2 weeks from now, that we have that information.
Okay.
Does that help, Mr. Pinnell?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we can provide some multiple scenario recommendations.
I think it helps in clarity, but it will be confusing on that day, but I think we will muddle through. So with that, I don't see any other issues, and for items, that's it. That was the last item. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Davey, all those in favor, opposed, carries. All right, thank you everyone, and thank you for all your patience.